Chapter 298. The two of them headed west. Yu Qianqiu rode on his sword and followed behind the female demon. That female demon's graceful figure did not touch the ground, only stepping on the grass. She looked light as a feather, but her speed was extremely fast, making Yu Qianqiu feel extremely amazed. She was literally flying on the grass. She seemed even more graceful than flying on grass. Her slender figure, pink clothes, and even her shoes were petite pink. The grass swayed with her feet and carried her far away. Her hair flew in the air, and her pink clothes matched the grass. She was very beautiful. Grass elves really had a unique advantage. Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, "What kind of monster is that old demon?" The female demon replied timidly, "He is an ancient vine spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. People around here call him Old Monster Tongue." She wasn't a match for the vine monster, and now, the man in front of her could even beat the vine monster into fleeing. He even wanted to chase it to its lair. With this ability, it was naturally not a problem for him to deal with her, so it wasn't strange for her to be afraid. Oh, no wonder he uses vines as weapons. The female demon's words confirmed his guess. He looked at the slender figure and said with interest, "I heard Old Monster Tongue call you Peach Blossom. Could you be a peach blossom tree spirit?" The female demon softly said, "Mister's guess is correct. I am a peach blossom tree spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. Peach Blossom, you and that old demon have both cultivated for 1,000 years. Why aren't you a match for him?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "Although he and I have both cultivated for 1,000 years, he transformed into a human 200 years ago. I just reached the nascent soul stage not long ago and am not good at fighting. Naturally, I am not a match for him," the Peach Blossom demon replied. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He had heard about this from Bai Suzhen. In the demon race, it was even more difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Unlike animals, it was extremely difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Without intelligence, how could grass and wood spirits cultivate? Therefore, it was even more difficult for them to become spirits. In order to reach the stage where they could transform into humans, all demons had to reach the nascent soul stage. Most of the plants would eventually wither and die without being able to gather their spiritual wisdom to cultivate. Even if they could cultivate, it would be difficult for them to transform into a human form even after thousands of years of cultivation. Among human cultivators, even those at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage would die of old age. As the saying goes, where there are gains, there are losses. Although the heavens were unfair, they were actually quite fair. Compared to humans, demons, and ghosts, plant spirits were the most difficult to cultivate. However, as long as they could break through to the deity transformation final stage, it was said that the heavenly tribulations were the weakest, and they would almost always be able to ascend to the immortal realm. Since you can't beat him, why didn't you agree to Monster Teng's request? Yu Qianqiu smiled. "If I didn't refuse, I would have died a long time ago," the Peach Blossom said in a low voice. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Why is that?" His thoughts went astray. Could it be that Monster Ting knew some method to absorb yin to replenish yang? Could it be that he would suck his mating partner dry? How did the two plant demons mate? The Peach Blossom bit her lip and said, "Sir, you should be careful. Monster Tongue has a wife called Tengpa. Her cultivation is higher than Monster Tongue's. She has reached the nascent soul stage, and is the subordinate of the Monster King Miss Mu." Although she didn't answer him directly, Yu Qianqiu understood. He reckoned that Tengpa was a jealous woman and couldn't tolerate her husband having other women. He thought for a while and asked, "What kind of demon is the Demon King Madame Mu? Is she the Monster King in charge of this place?" "Miss Mu is a magnolia demon. Her cultivation has reached the tribulation stage. She is the Monster King in charge of this place." "Oh," Yu Qianqiu said. He thought, "Why are there only plant spirits here?" Looking around, he understood. The plants here were much more exuberant than other places in the demon ghost territory. It was a good place for plant spirits. Speaking of Miss Mu, he thought of the 3 saints of Lingwu who had been killed. One of them, Red Lady, was definitely a coquettish and beautiful demon. He just didn't know what Miss Mu looked like. As he thought about it, an idea flashed in his mind. Don't I have a demon-revealing mirror? I didn't use it before because Bai Suzhen is also a demon. Isn't it suitable in the demon ghost territory? Let's try it. Yu Qianqiu immediately took out the delicate demon-revealing mirror. From the chain on it, it could be seen that this treasure should be hung around the neck. After wearing it around his neck, he looked at the peach blossom in front of him with the mirror. He didn't find anything. After he injected his divine sense into it, he finally found a magical effect. It turned out that he used his divine sense to look through the demon-revealing mirror. The peach blossom seen by his divine sense in the mirror was no longer a graceful woman. A peach tree full of flowers appeared clearly in the demon-revealing mirror. A divine craftsman was indeed a divine craftsman. The things he made were really magical. Yu Qianqiu sighed. After withdrawing his divine sense from the mirror, he felt that the small bronze mirror hanging on his neck was a little ugly. It was no different from the longevity lock hanging on the neck of a secular child. So he stuffed the mirror into the lapel on his chest and injected his divine sense into the peach blossom again. Fortunately, it could still show the original shape of the peach blossom. Good stuff. He touched his chest and found that the demon-revealing mirror was hanging there. Along the way, they constantly encountered some of the largest groups in the demon ghost realm. They were the blood wolves that Yu Qianqiu had seen when he first came here. This kind of fierce animal was not afraid of death. Yu Qianqiu had dealt with them before. He knew that if they attracted companions, although he was not afraid, it would be a troublesome thing. So without saying anything, he killed every wolf he saw. He didn't even give them a chance to make a sound. This action made the peach blossom a little frightened. After coming out of the dense forest, the front suddenly opened up. A few hundred meters away, a tall stone mountain seemed to have been split into two halves. One half was intact, and the other half seemed to have been moved away. Green vines spread everywhere at the foot of the mountain, covering the entire foot of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the mountain wall in front of him and asked, "This is the West Mountain Cliff you mentioned? Is this the hiding place of the old demon?" "Yes." The peach blossom looked around timidly and said, "Sir, please be careful. If the vine woman is here, it will be troublesome." Tizk. This stone mountain seems to have been split by someone. The power of nature is really amazing. It is not something that can be done by human beings. Yu Qianqiu looked at the smooth stone wall and sighed. He looked like he was looking at the scenery. As for the vine woman, he was not afraid of her. Since she was the subordinate of the demon king who was in charge of this place, she would not dare to do anything to the disciple of Bai Changchun. "Sir, the formation of this stone wall is not the power of nature. It is indeed the work of human beings. It was split by a sword." The peach blossom reminded him softly. Yu Qianqiu immediately opened his mouth and was stunned. This stone wall was probably 700 or 800 meters high and 300 or 400 meters wide. Moreover, it was a mountain of pure stone. Could someone split the whole mountain with a sword? Isn't this too inconceivable? He asked in disbelief. It was split by a sword? That's impossible. Did you see it with your own eyes? I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but this is something that everyone in this area knows. The peach blossom looked around guiltily, bit her lip, and slowly said while looking at the stone wall. It is said that more than 1,000 years ago, the Blood Wolf clan was the most powerful existence in the demon ghost region. At that time, the Blood Wolf Emperor had broken through to the soul formation stage, and he had the largest group in the entire demon ghost region. Thus, he was disloyal and did not want to be restrained by the torture master. As a result, he fought with the torture master here, and was killed by the torture master. This stone wall was split by the torture master's sword during that battle. The other half of the mountain was shattered, and the Blood Wolf Emperor was buried under the rubble. If you remove the green vines all over the field, you will find that it is full of rubble. Yu Qianqiu looked at the half of the stone wall, a little confused. More than 1,000 years ago. At that time, Bai Changchun should have already taken over as the torture master of the demon ghost region. He swallowed and asked, "That battle? The torture master you are talking about is Immortal Master Bai, who is now on Shuntian Island?" "Yes, Immortal Master Bai. After that battle, I heard that Immortal Master Bai was angered, and then..." The peach blossom seemed to realize that she had said too much. She looked around guiltily, and did not dare to continue. However, Yu Qianqiu was eager to know what Bai Changchun did after that, so he urged. What happened after that? Tell me quickly. He urged, but the peach blossom did not dare to speak. In the end, after being threatened by Yu Qianqiu, she could not help but say. After that battle, the torture master was furious. All the Blood Wolf clan members with a bit of cultivation, more than 400,000 of them, were all killed by the torture master in one night. At that time, there was a demon and a ghost in the demon ghost region who had also reached the soul formation stage, but because of that incident, they were also implicated. The torture master said that they were the ones who started it, and wanted the two soul formation stage cultivators to kill themselves to atone for their crimes. Of course, the demon and the ghost refused, so the torture master fought the two of them alone and killed them. From then on, except for the torture master, there were no other soul formation stage cultivators in the entire demon ghost region. Mister, this is all I know. I really don't know anything else. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly at the stone wall and nodded his head. So this mountain was Bai Changchun's masterpiece, and it was actually split apart by a single sword strike. His cultivation was just too terrifying, killing more than 400,000 blood wolves in one night. Ruthless. Ruthless beyond belief. Also, one person killed two soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Those were two soul formation stage cultivators. The scene of that battle was so thrilling that it was hard to describe. One soul formation stage cultivator killed two soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Wow. He was really powerful and ruthless. No wonder all the demons and ghosts in the demon ghost region trembled in fear at the mention of Bai Changchun's name, and didn't even dare to speak loudly. Who would dare to speak loudly in front of such a killing god? No wonder Healy said that he was merciless towards demons and ghosts and killed without mercy. He really wasn't joking. This immortal master Bai is really amazing, hee. Yu Qianqiu squeezed out a smile. After knowing about Bai Changchun's glorious deeds, he was really scared. He only hoped that he didn't see through his little tricks. If he angered this killing god, with his cultivation level, he might not even be able to escape. Chapter 299. However, after thinking about it, he understood Bai Changchun's difficulties. Think about it, in this vast demon realm, demons and ghosts ran amok. If there was no one to restrain them, what would happen? If all these things broke into the human world, then the so-called cultivation world would not be able to stop such a huge force. At that point, the human world would be in chaos. To restrain these demons and ghosts, it would be useless to reason with them. Often, iron and blood methods would be more effective. Bai Changchun was in charge of the demon realm. It seemed that he had killed countless people, but in fact he had saved more lives. After thinking it through, Yu Qianqiu's fear turned into admiration. Think about it, other soul formation stage cultivators did not want to be tied down by anything, but Bai Changchun abandoned his family, and ended up being tied down by this demon realm for nearly 2,000 years. His responsibility was great, and his actions were respectable. Yu Qianqiu was a little depressed. He had racked his brains to obtain the position of punishment envoy, but once he really took it, the burden on his shoulders would be immense. To put it nicely, he would have to shoulder the welfare of all living beings in the world. Whatever, he would get it first. If it didn't work, he would find someone else to take over. Yu Qianqiu thought it through in a blink of an eye. He looked around and asked, Peach Blossom, where is the real body of the old demon hiding? I don't know the specific location, but it must be hidden in the green vines under this stone cliff. Peach Blossom said a little uneasily. I see. Yu Qianqiu frowned. The green vines all looked the same. Who knew which one was under it? Without thinking too much, his figure flashed, and he flew above the green vines on his sword. He released his divine sense to check each place. He believed that this old demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years must be a little different from the other green vines. After checking, he was shocked. As Peach Blossom said, there were stones of different sizes under the green vines. It was probably the result of the half of the stone mountain being shattered. The green vines all grew out of the cracks in the stones. Even if he found the hiding place of the old demon, if it didn't come out, he would really have to spend some effort to dig it out. Starting from the place where the two of them were standing, he swept back and forth with his divine sense. After a few rounds, he found something wrong under the stone wall. At this time, the green vines within a radius of tens of meters grew from one tree. It would be strange if they didn't have such a huge branch. "Old demon, get out here." Yu Qianqiu stared down and shouted. The other flying swords that he had put into the storage bag flew out again and danced around him. However, after calling a few times, there was no response from below. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. More than a dozen flying swords shot out and slashed at the entangled old vine below. After slashing, he was even more sure that he found the right place. It often took a few slashes to cut off a vine. If it wasn't a demon, ordinary green vines wouldn't be so hard. "Alright, you don't want to come out, right? Fine, as long as you don't feel bad, I will cut slowly." Yu Qianqiu chuckled and sent out more than a dozen flying swords. Suddenly, there was a continuous sound of ding-dang-dang-dang. Dozens of flying swords rose and fell and slashed continuously. He was standing in the air watching the show with interest. Suddenly, there was a loud shout from afar. "Who is it? How dare you hurt my body? Stop right now." The voice was sharp and anxious. It was a woman's voice. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Did he make a mistake? The flying swords that were slashing wildly below returned to his side. After a while, a figure quickly flew over. He saw an old woman appear in front of him. She was dressed in hemp clothes and looked old. Her hair was tied up with a few green vines, and she held a cane in her hand. "Who are you? I have no grievances with you. Why did you hurt my body?" The old woman pointed at him and shouted angrily. Peach Blossom, who was standing in the distance, saw the old woman coming and quietly retreated into the forest. Yu Qianqiu looked at the vine that had been chopped into a mess and asked doubtfully, "You are Tung Pu? Since you know it's me, then you are deliberately looking for trouble." Tung Pu held the cane in her hand and was about to attack. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly waved his hand and said, "It's a misunderstanding. It's definitely a misunderstanding. I didn't do it on purpose. Old woman, you have to avenge me." At this moment, old Monster Tung appeared out of nowhere. He raised his palms that had lost all 10 fingers and looked pitiful. Yu Qianqiu looked back and his expression sank. He sneered and said, "Old thing, not hiding anymore?" Tung Pu looked at her man's palms and was so angry that her body trembled. "You did it." "Umph. Old woman, don't be anxious. First find out who did it." "That's right, your man is looking for a concubine outside behind your back. To think that you are still so protective of him. I even brought the victim who was bullied by your husband. Peach Blossom, HM? Peach Blossom?" Yu Qianqiu called out a few times, but did not respond. He turned his head and looked around. That female demon had already disappeared. She had actually abandoned him and fled. Yu Qianqiu was not angry. Instead, he sneered and said, "What a little demon who doesn't know what's good for her." He then pointed at old Monster Tung and Tung Pu and said, "And you guys, I think you are all tired of living." When Tung Pu heard Yu Qianqiu say that her man was looking for a concubine, she immediately turned her gaze to old Monster Tung. However, old Monster Tung's eyes flashed. He shouted, "Old woman, what are you hesitating for? Let's work together and kill this little thief." After saying this, he raised his arms. His missing 10 fingers immediately turned into 2 long whips that were as thick as a person's thighs. He ruthlessly smashed them toward Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on his sword. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "Hee hee. Very good. Very good." He immediately dodged to the side. The 2 long whips missed. With a loud bang, the whip smashed the 2 rocks below him into pieces. Then, he shot up like a snake and swept across the sky at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu jumped a few meters from the flying sword. The 2 long whips chased after him and brushed past his feet. The flying sword below him circled around and caught Yu Qianqiu again. Yu Qianqiu flicked his hand and pointed. Sword shadows danced and flashed. Almost 100 flying swords shot toward old Monster Tung. Old Monster Tung was shocked and withdrew his 2 whips to protect himself. The 2 whips twisted and flicked wildly, immediately knocking away many flying swords. However, There were still many flying swords that passed through. Old Monster Tongue was so frightened that he cried out. He used his 2 whips as crutches and propped himself up into the sky. Tung Po's eyes flashed. No one knew what she was thinking. She saw that her man was being forced into such a state, but she still did not help. Go! Yu Qianqiu lightly shouted with his fingers. The flying swords that were dodged immediately reversed and shot back toward Old Monster Tongue. The latter screamed and dodged in the air. Unfortunately, his speed was slowed down by the 2 huge whips in his hands. A few flying swords still nailed into his thighs. Old Monster Tongue let out a miserable cry in the air. Separate! Yu Qianqiu lightly sang with his fingers again. The flying swords that were nailed into Old Monster Tongue's thighs twisted wildly. They pierced through his thighs and shot in all directions. Old Monster Tongue let out another miserable cry. One of his thighs was cut off by the flying swords and fell from the sky. A green liquid exploded from the base of his thighs and slowly dripped down in the air. My leg! Old Monster Tongue cried out in sorrow. His arms that had turned into 2 whips went limp. He fell beside Tung Po and supported himself with one leg. He turned around and shouted angrily, "Stupid old woman, do you really want me to die in front of you? Ah, it's coming again." A group of flying swords circled in the air and shot toward him again. Tung Po coldly snorted. After all, this was her man. She finally made her move. She swung the vine staff in her hand, and it crashed into the group of flying swords. Ding ding dang dang sounds rang out. The flying swords were immediately scattered. Then, the vine staff spun around and whistled toward Yu Qianqiu. As for the remaining few flying swords, Tung Po unhurriedly untied the rattan belt around her waist. She raised her hand and shook it. With a whoosh, it turned into a long whip. Tung Po swung it out like a snake and swept it towards the few flying swords that were shooting at her. Chapter 300. The whip rose into the air like a divine dragon swinging its tail. It was extremely nimble and created several whip shadows that clashed with the flying swords. Dang dang, sounds were heard as the flying swords were immediately deflected away. Yu Qianqiu was startled by the whistling vine staff. The vine staff was like Jiangxia's god-beating whip. He quickly dodged it with his flying sword. Although he managed to dodge it, the strong wind brought by the vine staff made his clothes flutter. If he was hit by it, he would be smashed down from the sky. The vine staff missed its target, so it rolled and bounced up. It aimed at its target and smashed down again. Yu Qianqiu immediately summoned his flying sword to fight it. Unfortunately, the flying sword could not win at all. The vine staff had probably been refined into a high-grade magic tool. Someone was immediately chased by the vine staff and was forced to run around in the air. Old Monster Tongue, who was missing a leg, laughed sinisterly on the ground. A new leg slowly grew out from his broken leg, in a very disgusting manner. Although the new leg had grown out, Old Monster Tongue's face was a lot paler. This was obviously an action that consumed a lot of yuan qi. Gather! Yu Qianqiu shouted while he was hiding. The scattered flying swords quickly flew over with his 2 fingers as the center. They gathered into the shape of an umbrella and rotated in the air 2 meters away from his fingertips. The vine staff smashed down again. Yu Qianqiu waved his finger, and the umbrella sword shield immediately blocked it. Bang! The 2 collided and the sword shield was destroyed on the spot. The vine staff flipped and bounced up. It paused for a moment in the air before smashing down again. Damn! Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry and pointed with his 2 fingers. The 99 flying swords once again gathered into a sword shield to block. The 2 sides collided and a bang sound was heard again. Thus, a dramatic scene appeared in the air. One kept smashing down from all angles, while the other kept blocking from all angles. Immediately, Yu Qianqiu found himself in a very difficult situation. His 2 fingers continuously gathered the shattered flying swords and used them as shields. He blocked left and right in the air, blocking in all directions. Fortunately, the 2 demons had not reached the tribulation stage yet. Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu would not have been able to withstand the opponent's attacks. Resisting head-on in the air like this caused his true essence to be rapidly consumed. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly took out a few qi-returning pills and placed them in his mouth like he was chewing beans, swallowing them dry to recover his true essence. His face became more and more gloomy, and from time to time, 2 jumping green flames flashed in his eyes. It was just that he couldn't see it. He probably wanted to use the green flames that he had been suppressing. It seemed that he had to put aside the idea of practicing the imperial sword technique. I didn't expect a core formation cultivator to be able to use the sword control technique so skillfully. Tung Po looked at the sky and couldn't help but praise. For a core formation cultivator to be able to resist the combined attacks of 2 nascent soul cultivators was already quite impressive. She then turned around and asked, "Old man, who is this young man? How did he get here? Who the hell knows who he is? I don't care so much. Let's kill him and take revenge first." Old Monster Tung said with a sinister expression. On the treetop of a nearby forest stood a woman in a pink dress. Her hair was tied up in a high bun, and her face was cold and beautiful. She appeared exceptionally noble. Behind her stood 2 women in pink clothes of the same color, but the 2 of them were far inferior to the former in terms of temperament. The 3 women silently stood on the treetop and watched the battle not far away. The hem of their dresses fluttered in the wind. "Who is this young man? How did he get here?" The woman with the noble temperament suddenly asked the same question as Tung Po. The woman on her right replied, "Lady, I don't know either." Tung Po suddenly felt that someone was destroying her body, so she hurried over. Tung Po didn't say anything else. The noble woman frowned and said, "That's strange. That young man seems to be having a hard time fighting. His cultivation is only at core formation. A mere core formation cultivator wouldn't even be able to enter the outskirts of the demon realm. How did he get here?" The woman on the left was confused and said, "That's right. This place isn't far from the 1,000-mile lake. Could he be from Obedient Island? Could he be the disciple of the torture envoy?" Her words were just a casual guess, but the expressions of the other 2 people changed drastically. The woman on the right shook her head and said, "That's impossible. The cultivation of that torture envoy is unfathomable. How could his disciple be so useless? Didn't that heli also have the cultivation of the middle stage of passing calamity?" The noble woman's expression softened and she nodded and said, "That's right. No matter how useless the torture envoy's disciple is, his cultivation shouldn't be so weak." If Yu Qianqiu heard someone say this about him, he would definitely vomit blood in anger. Fortunately, he didn't hear it. He was fighting fiercely in the air, and the more he fought, the angrier he became. The 2 of them attacked him together, and he didn't even have a chance to fight back. He was constantly being suppressed. If Tung Po attacked him with her whip again, he wouldn't have been able to resist it. Finally, he couldn't play anymore. The feeling of being suppressed by someone else was very uncomfortable. His eyes were suffused with a penetrating green light, and 2 green flames were clearly lit up. The sword shield protecting Yu Qianqiu had just been destroyed by Tung Po's cane when a claw glowing with a demonic green light quickly passed through the flying swords and grabbed the cane, which had exhausted its momentum, and was about to return to attack again. At the same time, he stretched out 2 fingers with his other hand, and the shattered flying swords quickly condensed and blocked Curmudgeon Tung's whip. As soon as the sword shield was destroyed, 5 claws glowing with a demonic green light immediately reached out and grabbed the tail of the cane in the same way. The flying sword completed its task, and with a swish, it turned into a cold light and flashed into Yu Qianqiu's storage bag. The moment the cane whip was grabbed by Yu Qianqiu, Curmudgeon Tung on the other end of the cane cried out, "It's scalding me! It's scalding me! Let go, little boy!" His expression twitched as he swung his arm, which had turned into a cane whip. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore, and he gritted his teeth, leaving a long tail of the cane in Yu Qianqiu's hand, just like the last time he broke his fingers. Tung Po looked at her old man in surprise, who was jumping around and peeing, and then looked at Yu Qianqiu. The moment her cane was grabbed by Yu Qianqiu, the divine sense attached to it instantly disappeared, and she completely lost contact with the cane. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, and the things in his hands suddenly ignited with a blue flame. When the flame was extinguished, the things in his hands turned to ashes and were blown away by the wind. The sudden appearance of the 2 blue flames surprised everyone nearby and in the distance. But what surprised them even more was, A smile appeared at the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth. As a disciple of Bai Changchun, someone actually dared to beat him up in the demon ghost region. The more he thought about it, the more he found it interesting. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh and say, I didn't expect that I, Yu Qianqiu, would receive such a warm welcome from you two when I first arrived here. How can I repay you? Haha. Chapter 301. He might not have felt anything when he said that, but to the others, it was no less than a bolt from the blue. It was enough to make them lose their minds. Yu Qianqiu's voice was not soft. The woman who stood on the treetop like a noble empress clearly heard it, but she still could not believe it. She asked in a trembling voice, what did he say his name was? The two women behind her turned pale. Their eyes lost focus as they mumbled weakly, Yu Qianqiu. He's Yu Qianqiu, the disciple of the disciplinary envoy. Instantly, the noble woman's face turned ashen, and she lost all her temperament. You're Yu Qianqiu? Tung Po's face was filled with terror. Who cares what his name is? He won't be leaving here alive today. Don't show any mercy, old woman. Kill him. Old Freak Tung did not learn his lesson after suffering a loss. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had already put away his flying sword, he swung his two whips with a ferocious expression and lashed at the air. No. Stop. A few screams rang out at the same time. Unfortunately, old Freak Tung had already made his move. The disciple of the disciplinary envoy had already announced his name. But someone still dared to make a move. Wasn't this a death wish? It was fine if old Freak Tung was courting death, but according to the disciplinary envoy's temper, everyone present would probably be implicated. No one would be able to escape. Tung Po was completely flustered. The three women on the treetop were confused. The four women's minds were blank. They looked on dumbly and forgot to stop old Freak Tung. As the vine whips approached, Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. Green flames surged around his body, illuminating the gloomy sky with a dazzling green brilliance. There was a person standing in the middle of the green flames. It was a very strange scene. Tung Po and the three women were dumbstruck, and their hearts surged with boundless sorrow. They all asked themselves, how could the punishment envoy's disciple be an ordinary person? Old Freak Tung was shocked to see the strange condition on Yu Qianqiu's body. In addition to that, he heard Grandma Ting's cries from afar. He had a bad feeling about this. He was just about to pull back his whips when he saw Yu Qianqiu shoot out two balls of azure flames. In a moment of desperation, he retracted his whip to protect himself, wanting to deflect the incoming flames. Who would have thought that as soon as the two whips touched the two balls of green flames, it was as if the whips had been doused with kerosene. The green flames quickly spread from the tips of the whips all the way down, turning the two whips into ashes. Ah! Old Monster Tung let out a blood-curdling scream. How could the vine whip, which was connected to his body, withstand the pain of the azure fire? However, he hardened his heart. Before the fire reached him, his arms, which had transformed into two whips, once again broke off to protect himself. After losing his limbs several times, Old Monster Tung's essence was greatly damaged. He trembled in pain as he said, "Old woman, my essence is too exhausted. I can't attack anymore. Help me kill him." "Shut up." Tung Po shook her head miserably. Her face was filled with pain as the whip in her hand fell to the ground. Speechless, she knelt before Yu Qianqiu. "Old woman, you." Old Monster Tung finally realized that something was wrong. He looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror, then at Tung Po. When the cries rang out, Yu Qianqiu immediately noticed the three people on the treetop. From the actions of Tung Po and the others, he could tell that his identity was no longer a secret. Yu Qianqiu withdrew the flames around his body and coldly glanced at the forest. He snorted and said, "Do you still need me to invite you over?" The three figures quickly flew over and knelt down as soon as they landed. The woman leading them said in fear and trepidation, "Lady Mu greets Mr. We did not know that Mr. was here. Please forgive us." "Greetings, Yao Monarch." When the woman leading them arrived, Old Monster Tung immediately knelt down and kowtowed. However, he did not expect that the person he was kowtowing to was his enemy. He was stunned. Tung Po, who was kneeling beside him, began to weep softly. The three women's cultivation levels were not low. From the moment they arrived to the moment they knelt down, they were so fast that Yu Qianqiu did not manage to see their faces clearly. This made Yu Qianqiu, who originally wanted to see if the three women were beautiful, a little depressed. He could only put away the flying sword beneath his feet and descend to the ground. He said in a deep voice, "The three of you get up." He did not ask old monster Tung or Tung Pa to get up. After the three of them got up, they did not dare to raise their heads to look at him. Yu Qianqiu could only say again, "You are the Yao monarch, Lady Mu? I want to see you. The three of you, raise your heads." This little demon is indeed Lady Mu. Lady Mu bowed. She did not dare to call herself a Yao monarch in front of Yu Qianqiu. The three women slowly raised their heads. Their panicked eyes also took the opportunity to observe Yu Qianqiu. Her temperament was good, and she could be considered beautiful. Unfortunately, she could not compare to Bai Suzhen. Her figure was not great either, and she could not compare to Wu Lixue and the Temptress of 100 Charms. After looking at the three of them, Yu Qianqiu came to this conclusion. However, this feeling of raising one's head as a Yao monarch in the final stages of the tribulation transcendence was not bad. If he dared to say such words in the outside world, he would definitely be hunted down. Yu Qianqiu looked at old monster Tung and Tung Pa with slight disappointment. His gaze gradually turned cold. It was time to settle the score with these two. Yu Qianqiu lightly spat out these two words. He turned his hand around and clenched his fist. Whoa! The green flames surged and instantly engulfed the two of them. In that instant, Tung Pa suddenly threw herself onto old monster Tung, who was still kowtowing. It was as if she wanted to block the flames for her man. However, all she got in return were two miserable screams. As Yu Qianqiu indifferently sucked the green flames back into his palm, two piles of ashes appeared on the ground. A gust of wind blew them up, and they swirled away. Lady Mu and the other two's pupils shrank. They were shocked by the tyrannical power of the green flames. It had actually burned Tung Pa and old monster Tung to ashes in an instant. Who said that plants were heartless? Yu Qianqiu stood with his hands behind his back and watched the ashes float away. Then he swept his gaze over the green vines and coldly snorted. "I originally wanted to eradicate the two of you, but seeing that you two were so sentimental before you died, I'll let you two be ignorant plants and let the green vines entangle you until you wither. That's me being merciful." "Lady Mu." Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and said, "There's a peach blossom tree demon. Please capture him for me. I want him alive." Chapter 302. It was a large wooden house built against the mountain. It looked like a bandit's stronghold, and it was very old. In the middle of the house, there was a gurgling stream. This is the place where the ruler of this area, the Demon King Lady Mu, lives? Yu Qianqiu couldn't believe it at first. He had never seen the other ghost king of the demon ghost domain, but he had seen Meng Yan's underground palace. That imposing manner was like that of a local tyrant. This demon king is a little too simple. Could it be that he knows that I'm coming to collect protection fees, so he deliberately made it like this? Damn it, I don't even know how to open my mouth. After Lady Mu confirmed it again and again, he reluctantly believed it. After entering the stronghold, magnolia trees could be seen everywhere. Blooming magnolia were dotted among the green leaves, exuding a fragrance. Along the way, they didn't see many people, and most of them were women. "You only have these few subordinates?" Yu Qianqiu asked as they walked. Lady Mu, who accompanied him and led the way, replied, "Mister, you may not know this, but the spirits of plants are not like the spirits of animals. It's not suitable for them to leave their bodies for a long time. Usually, I only summon them when there's something. I'm being silly. I'll summon them immediately to greet Mister." "That's not what I meant. There's no need to go through so much trouble." Yu Qianqiu acted like a leader inspecting his work. He waved his hand, suddenly pulled his collar and sniffed, saying, "I was sprayed by the man-eating flowers. Do you have a place to take a bath?" "Yes." Lady Mu asked, "Mister, do you want to use a clear spring or a hot spring?" "You have a hot spring here? Haha, then let's use a hot spring." As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, Lady Mu immediately whispered to him, probably arranging for someone to prepare it. After a while, the two came to the largest main hall in the stronghold. It was probably the place where Lady Mu was in charge. The simple and exquisite decoration and the thick pink velvet carpet all reflected a woman's taste. Madame Mu stretched out her hand to lead the way. "Mister, please follow me." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and followed her out of the back hall. The scene in front of him suddenly became a little more elegant. There was a meandering stream, and a few small wooden bridges across it. It gave off the feeling of a small bridge, flowing water and people's houses. Magnolia trees were scattered among them. It was impossible to tell that this was the residence of a demon king. The two of them walked to the front of a cave. The arched semi-oval cave entrance was carved with intricate patterns, all of which were magnolia blooming in various postures. Miss Mu pulled up the pink gauze hanging at the entrance of the cave and said, "This is the place for bathing. The conditions are poor, but this is the only place in the entire village that is slightly better. Please don't take offense." Yu Qianqiu looked at the pink gauze she had pulled up and asked with a strange expression, "Is this where you take a bath?" Lady Mu nodded her head calmly. She had no choice. The other places were even more crude, and the place she used was the best. Therefore, she had no choice but to bring Yu Qianqiu there. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything and walked in. A 3-meter-wide bathing pool was in the middle of the stone room. After 2 water infusion troughs from different directions met, water was poured into the pool with a goo-goo sound. With a little effort, one could tell that one of the troughs was from a hot spring, while the other was from a clear spring. Presumably, the temperature had been adjusted according to the flow of water. The bright green pool water was slightly steaming, which was very tempting. Yu Qianqiu couldn't wait to take off his clothes. Suddenly, he remembered that Miss Mu was still by his side. He turned around and tugged at his clothes, saying with a smile, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." He signaled for Miss Mu to leave. "I'm going to take a bath." Unexpectedly, Miss Mu nodded and said, "I'll help you take a bath." After saying that, she stretched out her hand to help Yu Qianqiu take off his clothes. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Miss Mu, you've misunderstood me. That's not what I meant. How could I dare to trouble the Demon King to serve me? You should call 2 servants." Although he was embarrassed to take advantage of Miss Mu, he could still get 2 other women to serve him. That was what he meant. "No problem. It's my good fortune to be able to help you take a bath." As Miss Mu spoke, she stretched out her hand again. Yu Qianqiu pretended to decline her offer. Under the circumstances where it was difficult to refuse, he was stripped naked and went into the water naked. The water temperature was just right. Yu Qianqiu lay comfortably in the pool and let out a moan. He rested his head on his pillow and closed his eyes to enjoy the feeling. Suddenly, he heard the sound of water splashing. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Miss Mu had also stripped herself naked. Her naked body was exposed. 3 words immediately appeared in Yu Qianqiu's mind. "Lover's bath. She wants to seduce me." This was his next thought. However, when he looked at the expression on Miss Mu's face, he found that she was calm and her eyes were calm. After she leaned over, she did not make any other pretentious movements. Her slender fingers lifted his feet and began to massage his feet. Moreover, her technique was very professional. It seemed that she often did this kind of thing. Yu Qianqiu found it strange. How could a dignified demon king do this often? He couldn't help but ask, "Miss Mu, how did you become so skilled?" Miss Mu smiled and said, "You may not know this, but I served the previous demon king for more than 300 years. Of course I'm skilled." "Oh," Yu Qianqiu said, then closed his eyes to enjoy it again. Since Miss Mu herself did not care, he did not care either. At first, he still had some perverted thoughts, but they were replaced by the comfortable kneading and moving fingertips. Speaking of which, he still had a certain immunity to beautiful women. The key was that the women he had were all top-notch goods. They had good figures and looks. With Miss Mu's physical condition, she really did not have much attraction for him. The strength of her fingertips was just right. They wandered around every part of his body. After a while, Yu Qianqiu actually fell asleep comfortably. He did not know how long he had slept, But suddenly he was gently woken up. Miss Mu said softly, "Sir, the Peach Blossom Demon has been caught, and the Ghost King Yuyan, who is in charge of the local area, is also waiting to see you in the main hall." Yu Qianqiu's sleepy eyes immediately became clear. He climbed out of the water without hesitation and said, "Let's go and see." Miss Mu followed him out of the water. She took a cotton towel from somewhere and helped him wipe his body. The former enjoyed it calmly. His thinking was very simple. Since it was already like this, there was no need to worry about the two of them being willing. Yu Qianqiu summoned a new set of clothes out of thin air. Miss Mu was slightly stunned when she saw it, but immediately helped him put it on. She also quickly put on her clothes. "Your technique is very good. The massage is very comfortable." On the way to the main hall, Yu Qianqiu suddenly said with a smile, "How many people could enjoy having a bath with a demon king at the end of the crossing calamity stage, and having him give him a massage? Just thinking about it made him feel good. It is my blessing to be able to serve Sir. If Sir likes it, you can come often. I can't ask for more." Miss Mu also smiled. If she could have a good relationship with Bai Changqun's disciple, there was naturally no need to mention the benefits in the future. "Haha, I'm really afraid that I can't help but come often. I can't ask for more." The two of them went to the main hall with smiles on their faces. As soon as they came in, Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He saw the Peach Blossom Demon kneeling there. A beautiful woman wrapped in green muslin in the hall saw that Yu Qianqiu's expression was not good. She stole a glance at Miss Mu, who smiled slightly. She immediately knelt down and said, "Yuan pays respect to Sir." Yu Qianqiu glanced at her coldly and raised his hand to signal her to get up. He walked straight to Peach Blossom and sneered, "Peach Blossom, do you still recognize me?" How could Peach Blossom not recognize him? She did not know why she was caught and brought here. She was in a panic. Now that she saw him walking out with the Demon King and the Ghost King kneeling down to greet him, she immediately realized that she had made a big mistake. She knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly. "I know I was wrong, I know I was wrong. I saved you, but you left me and ran away secretly. Hey, I hate ungrateful people the most in my life. Get up. It's useless to bow again." Yu Qianqiu stared at her and said. Peach Blossom hugged his leg and begged bitterly, "Sir, forgive me this time. I won't dare to do it again. I asked you to get up, didn't you hear me?" Yu Qianqiu's voice was very cold. Peach Blossom stood up shakily. Tears were already flowing down her face. She shook her head and cried, "I've been cultivating for thousands of years. I transformed into a human form and was alone. I didn't know Sir's ability at that time. When I saw Tungpe, I was really scared." Her voice stopped abruptly. Yu Qianqiu suddenly poked her chest with both hands. Peach Blossom opened her mouth wide and her eyes bulged. Soon, her eyes shrunk deeply, and smoke began to come out of her 7 orifices. Then, the skin all over her body rapidly shrank. Suddenly, a blue flame emerged from her body, and she disappeared without a trace in an instant. "You have eyes but failed to see the situation clearly. Since you can't see the situation clearly, why do you still transform into a human form and continue to be a 1,000-year-old peach tree?" Yu Qianqiu opened his 5 fingers indifferently and sucked the blue flame back into his palm. Chapter 303. The thick pink carpet was not damaged at all, but there was a pile of ashes. It was hard to believe that such a powerful flame could burn on the carpet without burning it. It could be seen that Yu Qianqiu's ability to control flames had reached an exquisite level. Only Yu Qianqiu himself knew the secret. It was said that playing with fire would cause one to be burned, but he was able to control it freely. The Demon King Miss Mu was a little better. She had already seen the fate of Tungpe and her husband. But the Ghost King, Yuyan, was a little creeped out. Yu Qianqiu had turned the demoness into ashes with a gentle point of his finger. She thought that she could easily kill the demoness, but it was absolutely impossible for her to turn a person's bones into ashes with a flick of her finger. In particular, the aura emitted by the blue flame was extremely young. Without even trying, she already knew that it could restrain her. The disciple of the torturer was indeed extraordinary. The way he killed without batting an eye was very similar to the style of a torturer. Yan looked at Yu Qianqiu with more and more respect. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Yan, who was standing with her hands behind her back. Although he hated ungrateful people, but to kill a peach blossom here was more or less like killing the chicken to warn the monkey. He wanted to show the female ghost king that he, the disciple of the torture envoy, was not someone to be trifled with. He walked unceremoniously to the chair in the middle of the main hall and sat down. Looking at the two people standing below, he said, "Since the Demon King and the Ghost King are both here, I will say what I want to say. I have something to ask of you this time. I need a batch of spirit stones. I don't know how many you can give me." Miss Mu smiled and said, "The spirit stones have been prepared. Why did Mr. come here in person?" Yu Qianqiu was startled and said, "What? Did you know I was coming to collect spirit stones?" Miss Mu and Yan looked at each other. The former asked doubtfully, "When Heli was still here, he had set a rule. Did Mr. not know?" "I don't know what rule," Lady Mu explained. "The demon realm is divided into 300 territories, and each territory is controlled by a demon and a ghost. Therefore, Healy made a rule that each territory needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. At the beginning of every month, the rulers of the 300 territories will send people to deliver the spirit stones to the 1,000 Miles Lake, and Healy will take them all. There is no need for you to go door to door and collect them." "What?" Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. "Each territory only needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month?" He still had some words in his heart. "Of Mr. Are you trying to fool me? Just a single piece of land is already frighteningly large. Only you guys can afford to fork out 10,000 a month. Of the territory of the demon realm was already, but it was 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not inappropriate, it's just that." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Isn't it a little too little to pay 10,000 high-grade spirit stones per month for each territory?" Mr. Tuov of the rule? "In that case, how much do you think is appropriate?" Well, Yu Qianqiu thought to himself. With 300 territories, 10,000 yuan per month was indeed too little. In a year, it would only be a total of 30 million yuan. It was not even as good as the 2 7-star blood orchids that he sold. If it was increased by 100 times, it would be more than 3 billion yuan in a year. That would be a great profit. After thinking for a while, he said, "What do you think? How about 1 million per month from each territory?" "What 1 million? Miss Mu and Yu Yan exclaimed in unison, their faces full of disbelief. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened as he snorted coldly. "What? Is 1 million a lot? There are indeed too many. I reckon that most of the territories won't be able to be handed over." Lady Mu shook her head and said with a wry smile, "Sir, you may not know this, but spirit stones are the rarest thing in the demon ghost territory. Just like our territory, it's difficult to gather 1 million upper-grade spirit stones in a year. Sir, you want us to hand over 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not that we don't want to, but we can't." Yu Qianqiu was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Is the demon ghost territory so poor?" In his impression, the demon ghost territory was not only rich in all kinds of rare spirit grasses, but there should also be a lot of spirit stones. In the past, he not only got a lot of top-grade spirit stones in the demon ghost territory, but he even got some divine-grade spirit stones. He was too lazy to dig up those upper-grade spirit stones. How could a demon king not even have 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month? Lady Mu smiled bitterly and said, "Compared to the human world, the demon ghost territory is indeed very poor. The same demon cultivators, on the same cultivation level, spend more time in the demon ghost territory than in the human world, and even spend several times more time. Fortunately, the spiritual qi in the demon ghost territory is far more abundant than in the human world." This time, Yu Qianqiu was a little depressed. He believed that the two women did not have the courage to lie to him. It seemed that his plan to get rich was ruined. He asked with a little unwillingness, "Could every territory be so poor? Aren't there any rich ones?" That might not be the case. Territories with good luck might discover new mines that have yet to be excavated, but the chances are very small. After all, the demon ghost territory has existed for so many years. Furthermore, the ratio of cultivation is far greater than in the human world. Even if a new mine is excavated, the share is also very large. Therefore, there are very few undiscovered spirit stone mines. Most of the territories are searching for missing spirit stones in some old mines. Lady Mu explained. It seemed like it was purely a coincidence that they found the spirit stone mine back then. Yu Qianqiu sat there in silence. Right now, he was very concerned about the tens of millions of upper-grade spirit stones that were swallowed by the Wu clan. After a long time, he said helplessly, "Since that is the case, let's follow the old rules." Looking at the sky outside, it was already slightly bright. He reckoned that another day had passed, and he still had to rush back to farm. There were still a few days before the start of the month, and the spirit stones for the deficient flame mystic fruit couldn't be cut off. It seemed like he had to use his capital to pay for a few more days. Forget it. Even if it was less, there would still be 36 million spirit stones in a year. After deducting the amount that was used up, he could still earn around 30 million spirit stones. He could only comfort himself like this. He stood up listlessly and waved his hand. That will be all. I still have something to do and have to rush back. He was in a low mood, but he didn't think about it. How many sects could earn 30 million spirit stones in a year, even in the human world? He should be content with what he had. However, he was used to seeing a lot of money, and he couldn't lift his spirits with less money. "Mr." Lady Mu walked over and bowed. "I just received a message. A few demon kings and ghost king in the nearby territories heard that Mr. is here, and are rushing over at top speed. They wish to pay their respects to Mr. Some of the territories even prepared a greeting gift for Mr. Would Mr. like to wait a little longer?" Yu Qianqiu took a glance at her and thought, damn it. She was so poor that she couldn't even afford spirit stones. How could she possibly have a greeting gift? What else could the demon domain have besides spirit herbs? When he thought of spirit herbs, he was slightly taken aback. He reached for the Pill Grandmaster's Pill Recipe Jade Archive and took out a blank Jade Archive. He spent some time copying the spirit herbs that he didn't have on the Jade Archive and handed it to Lady Mu. "There are some drawings of spirit herbs in here. You can make a few copies and pass them to the other demon kings and ghost king. Tell them to help me collect some when they have time. As for the greeting gifts, keep them for me. Give them to me when the opportunity arises." Lady Mu took the Jade Archive and asked in surprise, "Mr. Do you know alchemy?" "What's so strange about that?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand weakly. "I'll take my leave first." He didn't know that almost no one in the demon domain knew alchemy. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many rare spirit herbs left uncollected in the demon domain. Lady Mu glanced at Yu Yan and bowed. "I'm afraid you might run into someone as blind as old Monster Tongue. We'll see you off, mister." "There's no need." Yu Qianqiu walked out of the hall alone. With his back facing the two women, he waved his hand and said, "I'm not in a good mood. If there are any more blind fools, I won't waste my breath on them. I'll kill every one of them I see." Then he unsheathed his long sword and carried him away into the sky. Chapter 304. After returning to Shuntian Island, Yu Qianqiu remembered that he had forgotten to ask where the spirit stones could be obtained at the 1,000-mile lake. There was no need to go back and ask. Although a small silver ball had been secretly placed in Miss Mu's village, with Bai Changchun around, he did not dare to play the trick of suddenly disappearing and reappearing, so he could only wait until that day. In the following days, in addition to taking care of the deficient flame profound fruit, Yu Qianqiu also paid his respects to Bai Changchun every morning and evening. The old man sat there cross-legged without even opening his eyes. He only let out a soft hum, indicating that he understood. In fact, Bai Changchun did not restrict his freedom at all. As long as he served the deficient flame profound fruit well, he could play however he wanted and go wherever he wanted. However, he still did not dare to leave the demon domain. After all, he had not agreed to leave the demon domain. The surrounding houses where Healy used to live now belonged to him, so he often wandered by Bai Changchun's door, looking for an opportunity to strike up a conversation. However, Bai Changchun was like an old monk in meditation, sitting there without moving. Yu Qianqiu was anxious. Since he had already taken him as his master, he had to get some real things out of the old man's mouth. For example, the old man's cultivation method was what he coveted the most. Just think, more than 2,000 years ago, when the old man had not yet reached the soul formation stage, none of the top masters in the cultivation world could exchange more than 3 moves with him. Furthermore, he had the ability to split a mountain with his sword. Any one of them would be enough for him to show off. Taking a step back, he could also give one of the spiritual treasures of the 4 families that he had seen last time. However, Bai Changchun had been sitting there, and he did not dare to disturb him except for the excuse of paying his respects. At the beginning of the month, he once again went to Lady Mu's mountain stronghold with his sword. When she found out that he came because he didn't know the location of the Spirit Stones collection, Lady Mu told him the location with a strange expression on her face. Then she helped him bathe together. He lay in the bath and made a decision. He asked Lady Mu to pass on the message that the place to collect spirit stones would be changed to this mountain stronghold. Miss Mu was naturally happy about this. It was definitely a good thing to be in contact with the disciples of the punishment enforcer. While putting on his clothes, Yu Qianqiu asked, "Didn't you say last time that someone was going to give me a gift? Have you delivered it yet?" Miss Mu, who was naked but was helping him put on his clothes, smiled and said, "They said there's no need to trouble me. When I see you, I'll give it to you personally." "Are they afraid that you'll keep their things?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "That's not it. Even if they wanted me to stop them, they would know that I wouldn't dare to do so. He probably wants to meet you and express his sincerity," Lady Mu said with a smile. "Problem?" Yu Qianqiu snorted. He could guess what those demons and ghosts were thinking. They just wanted to get acquainted with the disciplinary envoy's disciple. After thinking about it, he decided to satisfy them, so he said, "Miss Mu, send a message to those who want to see me. Tell them to wait for me here at the beginning of next month." Lady Mu, who was dressing herself, smiled and said, "With your words, my place will be lively. I reckon that the 300 demon kings and the 300 ghost king will all rush here." As he spoke, he suddenly frowned and said, "Mister, won't this cause too much of a commotion? What if the torture enforcer is unhappy? Damn it. It's better if he's unhappy. I can't even find a chance to talk to him. It's best if he can find me." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered, and he waved his hand and said, "It's fine. If there's anything, just push it to me. Just say that I was the one who called for them." Speaking of all the demon kings and ghost king coming here, Yu Qianqiu thought of Yu Ji, who was good at playing tricks. He didn't know if she would still come after her husband died. She probably would. Understood. Lady Mu looked at him meaningfully. If it was the Li He of the past, he would definitely be very careful, and would never dare to say something like this. Lady Mu had already sent someone to fetch the spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu wanted from the 1,000 Miles Lake. Yu Qianqiu tossed the spirit stones into his storage pouch, and rushed back to Obedient Island. He found that Bai Changchun was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed meditating. He didn't know how long Bai Changchun was going to sit there. After wandering around for a few days, Miao Yi grew impatient, so he gave up on the idea of wandering around Miao Yi's doorstep. He took out a jade archive and ran to the edge of the island to study it. Recorded on it were the orbits of the star atlas of the 4 directions. Since he had nothing better to do, and it wasn't like he could steal it, he might as well see if he could come up with something similar to the star flame fire technique. In the past, he had guessed that the star atlas contained 5 types of elemental magic arts, but he was still groping for the right direction, so he didn't know if it was possible. Bai Changchun didn't even need to open his eyes to know that Yu Qianqiu had been wandering around during this period of time. With his level of cultivation, not even an ant crawling on the island could hide from him. Miao Yi was also curious about Yu Qianqiu's actions. During the day, this kid would wander around blindly after finishing his work. When he had nothing to do, he would catch a few fish and roast them. Occasionally he would catch some birds and beasts to roast, and would even ask if Miao Yi wanted to eat them. Miao Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so Miao Yi decided to ignore him. Furthermore, the wine in his storage pouch seemed to be inexhaustible, and he used it as water to quench his thirst. At night, as soon as the sky turned dark, Miaowie would cover his head and sleep soundly, snoring loudly until dawn. Once he got up, he would run to the edge of the lake and make some strange movements with his buttocks in the air. Then he would strip naked and dive into the water to swim. He would catch a fish for breakfast, and when he was full, he would go to work in the garden of the deficient flame profound fruit. Just like this, Miaowie had never seen him cultivate. If everyone was like him, then there would be no need for him to cultivate. Miaowie really didn't know how he was able to reach the late core formation stage at such a young age. Actually, Bai Changchun didn't know that Yu Qianqiu himself didn't want to be idle like this. The key was that ever since he absorbed the azure fire, the core in his dantian seemed to have a spiritual nature, and could refine spiritual qi to cultivate. If he were to sit down and painstakingly cultivate, it would be faster to let nature take its course. In fact, he only needed to take out a spirit stone from time to time and absorb spiritual qi. Since it was already like this, was there still a need for him to sit there and cultivate? In addition, he didn't dare to steal it, so he naturally had nothing better to do. Therefore, in the morning he would do calisthenics, swim, and make some snacks. Otherwise, Big Brother would be lonely. Which star chart of the 4 directions should he study first? Yu Qianqiu sat by the lake, shaking his head as he pondered. His gaze fell upon the surface of the lake, and he paused for a moment. In his previous life, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were located in the north. If his guess was correct, the northern star chart should be related to water. With such a large lake here, it was just the right time to verify his conjecture. Out of boredom, he immediately found a way to pass the time. He immersed his divine sense into the northern star chart recorded in the Jade Archive, and calmed his body and mind as he studied the changing trajectories of the star chart. As he sat there, he lost track of time. The moon rose, the moon set, and the stars sank. In the blink of an eye, it was dawn of the next day, yet he was still sitting there in the same position. Usually he would work in the morning, but even when the sun was high in the sky, he was still sitting there with his eyes closed, deep in thought. He had already entered a certain state. This strange phenomenon immediately attracted Bai Changchun's attention. Sitting cross-legged in the room, Bai Changchun finally opened his eyes, revealing an expression of disbelief. He abruptly disappeared from where he was, and soundlessly reappeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. His eyes shone brightly as he sized him up. With his eyes closed, Yu Qianqiu's expression kept changing. Sometimes he would smile foolishly like a child, sometimes he would furrow his brows in deep thought, and sometimes his brows would relax and he would nod slightly, as if he had understood something. Bai Changchun's expression was extremely shocked. He had cultivated for more than 2,000 years, and his knowledge was vast. The Yu Qianqiu in front of him had obviously comprehended something, and entered a state of enlightenment. For cultivators, this was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. Once they comprehended it, they would benefit for the rest of their lives. Normally, cultivators with low comprehension would find it very difficult to enter this state. Usually, only cultivators with extremely high talent would be able to enter this state. For example, he himself was considered one of the most talented cultivators in the same generation. When he broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, he entered a state of enlightenment. After another 300 years, he broke through to the middle stage from the early stage of soul formation. And after another 500 years, this state of enlightenment appeared again, helping him break through to the late stage of soul formation. However, after reaching the late stage of soul formation, after more than 1,000 years, this state of enlightenment that he yearned for never appeared again. As his lifespan was nearing its end, he had no choice but to search for external methods. He wanted to take the risk of entering the Eastern Holy Land, to find a method to break through and ascend. He broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, and reached the middle stage at the age of 600. In total, it took him 1,100 years to reach the late stage of soul formation. Among his peers, his talent was definitely at the top of the best. At the same time, he understood that this was inseparable from his bitter cultivation. However, this young man in front of him, who was always fooling around and idling around, had actually entered a state of enlightenment. His talent was already considered high, But he only had this opportunity when he was 300 years old. But how old was this kid? Was it talent or the will of the heavens? How was this possible? He had never heard of it before. Bai Changchun shook his head and smiled bitterly. His gaze fell on the jade archive in Yu Qianzhou's hand. He thought to himself, could it be that there's something strange about this jade archive? He raised his hand, wanting to take it for a closer look. However, just as he raised his hand, he put it down again and shook his head slightly. If it had nothing to do with this jade archive, he would definitely wake Yu Qianzhou up from this state of enlightenment. If he took the jade archive, he might even ruin the one and only opportunity in his life. It was difficult to seek for oneself, but it was also impossible to destroy others. This was the will of the heavens. This was the will of the heavens. He could not go against the will of the heavens. Bai Changchun raised his head to look at the horizon and sighed softly. He thought of the phrase he often said, if the heavens have feelings. However, it had been a long time since the heavens' favor had descended upon him. Now it had descended upon the disciple he had accepted. Fate, was this the will of the heavens? Chapter 305. Bai Changchun's gaze paused on the blazing sun. Only then did he remember that this kid was in a meditative state, and he didn't know when he would wake up. He probably wouldn't think of the deficient flame profound fruit for a while. It seemed like he could only do it for him. After idling around for so long, it was rare for him to have this kind of luck after calming down. Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianzhou and shook his head with a wry smile. His figure flashed and appeared in the garden where the deficient flame profound fruit was planted. He took out some spirit stones from his storage bag. Yu Qianzhou didn't know that his current state was something that could only be found by chance. Even Bai Changchun was envious of this state. For him, as long as he was willing to calm down, this state should appear at any time. It was the same when he comprehended the star flame fire technique last time. In fact, as Bai Changchun thought, there might be some heaven's will involved, or it could be luck. Bai Suzhen and Yu Qianzhou didn't know the name of the golden bead. If Bai Changchun knew about its mysterious effects, he would be able to tell its origin. This thing was the star bead that caused the ancient cultivation world war. In fact, it wasn't just the cultivation world. As the punishment envoy of the demon ghost domain, Bai Changchun also knew other unknown secrets. In the ancient cultivation world war, even many experts from the immortal world risked being punished by the immortals. They braved the danger of never being reincarnated, and never being reincarnated to come to the human world to fight over this star bead. At that time, this world was a world where humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted. The three creatures abided by their rules and generally wouldn't openly offend each other. They each cultivated their own way. When the time came, you became your immortal, and I became my immortal. In the end, a group of strong people turned the world upside down for this bead. The rules that humans, demons, and ghosts abided by became **T. In short, the duel between the higher-ups implicated the lower-ups. The lower-ups didn't know what the higher-ups were doing, but they also followed and caused chaos in the world. Demons and ghosts ran amok everywhere, and the human bodies that didn't cultivate suffered. It was at this time that an amazing person appeared and tricked a group of people who liked to fight to a desolate continent in the east. He set up some heaven and earth great array, and trapped the group of troublemaking hooligans. That place was now the **T Eastern Holy Land. However, because of this, the powerful man was severely injured by a group of hooligans. Before he died, the powerful man once again showed his power and forced most of the demons and ghosts to another barren land. Because he was about to die, he did not have the ability to cast a formation again. So he used his spiritual treasure to casually play around. When there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey would act as the king. The awesome man chose the remaining expert who was about the same level as him to be the torturer, meaning that if there was a ghost or a demon that was disobedient, he would punish him. This was the origin of the domain of demons and ghosts. So Bai Changchun, as a torture envoy, knew that the golden pearl was called the star pearl. The misty universe existed eternally. The primordial bead was bestowed by the primordial chaos. There was a legend passed down from generation to generation among the torturers of the domain of demons and ghosts. It was said that those who could obtain and control the star pearl could become a god who dominated a region. In other words, it was an existence that was more advanced than immortals. It was the kind of existence that no one could restrain except for the primordial chaos. Therefore, such an awesome thing naturally made the experts in the immortal world unable to restrain themselves. So, they ran to the human world to play hooligans. Unfortunately, a large group of people was defeated by an awesome person. If Yu Qianqiu knew that he had such a thing in his hands, he would definitely go crazy with joy. Fortunately, he did not know. However, he was not a fool. Even if he did not know, he would have regarded the golden pearl as his family treasure. Except for Bai Suzhen, who already knew. It would be difficult for others to ask him even if they beat him to death. He could feel the benefits of the golden pearl more and more, so he decided to keep it to himself until he was old. In this way, it also explained why Yu Qianqiu could enter the state that even Bai Changchun envied so easily. Originally, with the star pearl in his body, comprehending the orbit of the stars, compared to others, was like looking for something in his own home. It was much easier than others. Yu Qianqiu, whose consciousness was immersed in the Jade Archive, didn't know how much time had passed. His mind was filled with the changing orbit of the stars. In order to transform it into a cultivation technique, he racked his brains. Because he had the experience of comprehending the starflame fire technique by chance, the orbit of the countless stars in the constellation diagram was slowly merging and straightening out. Bai Changchun had just finished replenishing the spirit stones for the starflame profound fruit. His eyes suddenly flashed, and he teleported to Yu Qianqiu's side. He saw that Yu Qianqiu, who was originally sitting casually, had already sat cross-legged in a well-behaved manner. His face had a gratified smile, and an expression of understanding. He had comprehended it. It had only been a little more than a day. Bai Changchun was an experienced person. He could tell at a glance. His expression twitched a little, and at the same time, he could tell that Yu Qianqiu was still in a state that had yet to awaken. Everything he was doing now was like a dream. Bai Changchun's gaze fell on the jade archive that had fallen to the ground. He raised his hand and sucked it into his palm. He imbued his consciousness to examine it, and found that it was filled with a mess of densely packed dots of light. Who knew what they were? However, Bai Changchun's intuition told him that Yu Qianqiu's entry into the realm might have something to do with this item. Thus he patiently examined it, hoping to discover something. One was sitting, the other was standing. Unknowingly, another day had passed like this. The sky brightened once again. Bai Changchun slowly opened his eyes and shook his head with a bitter smile. He had pried into someone else's privacy without their permission. Based on his own status, he shouldn't have done so, even though this person was his disciple. Unfortunately, even though he was thick-skinned enough to do so, he still couldn't see through it. There were countless dots of light inside, and he really couldn't figure out what they were. Actually, it wasn't just him. Even if the gods were here, they wouldn't be able to understand what they were. These were the markings of the stars that Yu Qianqiu had memorized in a hurry. To be more precise, it should be the markings of the 5 directions constellations, with the southern one missing. It was an incomplete item to begin with, and Yu Qianqiu had made it for Bai Changchun to see. It was like a person's handwriting. If the handwriting was too sloppy, it would be difficult for others to understand it. Only the person who wrote it would be able to understand it. Even the gods wouldn't be able to understand such an unfathomable thing recorded in the Jade Archive, let alone Bai Changchun, even though he had a profound cultivation base. Regretfully, Bai Changchun quietly placed the Jade Archive back in its original spot. He had done something shameful, and thought to himself, "I'll make it up to you in the future." Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly sensed something amiss with his spiritual sense. He looked around but couldn't find anything. He immediately released his divine sense to investigate. He saw that the surface of the lake that Yu Qianqiu was facing was densely packed with tiny, crystalline dots that were hard to see with the naked eye. Those dots of light were like happy little fairies, circling around Yu Qianqiu's body and jumping around cheerfully. Finally, they burrowed into Yu Qianqiu's pores. What are these things? Could it be that an external evil has invaded his body? Bai Changchun was shocked. He still had many questions for this disciple of his, and he couldn't afford for anything to happen to him at this moment. He immediately raised his hand with a solemn expression, intending to use his profound cultivation base to chase these tiny, unknown things away. However, in the end he didn't make a move. He was stopped by the comfortable expression on Yu Qianqiu's face. An external evil invading one's body should be painful, not comfortable. With his rich experience, Bai Changchun didn't make a rash decision. Instead, he carefully stood guard for Yu Qianqiu. If he found anything amiss, he would immediately lend a helping hand. Standing next to Yu Qianqiu, he could feel the air getting more and more humid. It was so humid that he could squeeze water out of it. A faintly discernible, illusory, and transparent substance began to wrap around Yu Qianqiu, until it turned into a watery liquid, clear and transparent. Bai Changchun heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had been overthinking things. This kid seemed to have cultivated some kind of mysterious technique. Looking at the blazing sun in the sky, Bai Changchun smiled bitterly once more. He teleported to the deficient flame profound fruits garden. Chapter 306. Water Elements. The little elves happily flowed into his meridians. A smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. It seemed like his guess about the 5 directions star map was right. There were indeed 5 elemental spells of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. After mastering the spell, Yu Qianqiu didn't have any misgivings and placed the water elements into the cultivation center, the Dantian. Once the little fellows entered the Dantian, they were immediately attracted to the core formation like the fire elements. They all surged towards the core formation, one after another, and for some unknown reason. When the water element no longer entered his Dantian, and began to surge toward his limbs and bones, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled. It was as if he was extremely thirsty and suddenly drank cool spring water. He was so comfortable that he let out a moan. Then he quickly began to circulate the water art. Bai Changchun, who was standing not far away, watched the strange scene in front of him. He saw that Yu Qianqiu was surrounded by a huge transparent ball of water. His whole body had left the ground and was floating in the middle of the ball of water. Just when Yu Qianqiu let out a moan, countless tiny shiny objects that were hard to see with the naked eye rose from the 1,000-mile lake and rushed towards him. The ball of water with a diameter of about 2 meters began to expand. When the ball of water expanded to about 10 meters in diameter, it stopped. Bai Changchun's expression was serious. This was already the 10th day since Yu Qianqiu entered the qi refining realm. The longer he stayed in the qi refining realm, the more benefits he would get. Every time he entered the qi refining realm, he would stay in the qi refining realm for 10 days at most. If Yu Qianqiu could stay in the qi refining realm for more than 10 days, then without a doubt, Yu Qianqiu's talent was higher than his. People who had reached his level of cultivation all knew that the length of time one stayed in the qi refining realm was related to the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. Usually, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm. Otherwise, the shorter the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. This was talent. When the water element was injected into every cell in his body, Yu Qianqiu was initially worried that water and fire would not be compatible, because his body stored the fire element of the green fire. Who knew that once the water element entered his body, the fire element in every cell would start to compress and automatically give up half of the space. Water and fire would coexist in a line and would not interfere with each other. Just as he was about to call it a day, the core in his Dantian suddenly began to move. From the initial slow rotation, it gradually turned into a rapid rotation. The true essence in his Dantian was crazily absorbed. The true essence in his Dantian was sucked dry, and it began to spread to the true essence outside his Dantian. His Dantian was like a sewer, and all the true essence in his body was sucked in. There was only one reason, and that was to support the absorption of the core. F***ckme. How could this be? Yu Qianqiu panicked a little. He had never heard of such a thing. If this continued, he would be sucked dry. He quickly grabbed a handful of spirit stones with both hands, and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Bai Changchun naturally noticed Huang Xiaolong's abnormality. Huang Xiaolong was still in the process of advancing, but he could still take out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy. Strange. But at this moment, Yu Qianqiu was not feeling strange, but afraid. The true essence in his body was almost sucked dry, and the core did not even let go of the spiritual energy in his dantian, crazily rotating and absorbing it. 2 more handfuls of spirit stones, not enough. Then 2 more handfuls, still not enough. Huang Xiaolong grabbed handfuls of spirit stones, crazily absorbing the spiritual energy into his body. Unfortunately, the core was like a bottomless pit, not rejecting anything, whether it was true essence or spiritual energy. As long as it was to its liking, it would absorb it all. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu wished he could take out the black divine grade spirit stone and absorb it, but his mind was still clear. They were still on the obedient island. Who knew what kind of consequences it would bring if he took out such a heaven-defying treasure? Bai Changchun's eyes shone brightly as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. The speed at which he was absorbing spiritual energy was getting faster and faster. In the end, Bai Changchun was able to grab a handful of spirit stones in each hand, like a whale drinking water. 2 handfuls of spirit stones were sucked dry in the blink of an eye, then tossed away. Another 2 handfuls, more and more spirit stones appeared in Bai Changchun's hands, to the point that they were about to fall off. 10,000 high-grade spirit stones, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, 200,000. Bai Changchun was dumbfounded. How could someone absorb spirit stones at such a crazy speed? Even with his cultivation, he could only absorb 10,000 high-grade spirit stones at a time, then slowly refine them. It was impossible for him to absorb spirit stones endlessly. How could his body store so much spiritual energy without refining it? Not to mention, he no longer needed to absorb spirit stones to increase his cultivation. Crazy. 2 handfuls of over 100 high-grade spirit stones were sucked dry in 2 seconds. In 1 minute, he had absorbed over 3,000 high-grade spirit stones. In 2 hours, that was close to 200,000 high-grade spirit stones. Bai Changchun was so shocked that he nearly forgot to replenish the deficient flame profound fruit. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu finally stopped, panting heavily. In fact, Bai Changchun was more exhausted than Yu Qianqiu. In 2 days, Bai Changchun estimated that he had absorbed more than 10 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. It was truly shocking and unbelievable. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu was floating in the air, and below him was the foot of the obedient island that extended all the way to the 1,000 Miles Lake. Otherwise, he would have been drowned by the spirit stones. Damn it. It finally stopped. What the hell is this? Making this daddy so nervous. This daddy almost died of exhaustion. Yu Qianqiu's little heart was thumping wildly. The haunted core in his dantian finally stopped. At this time, the core had already turned golden. From its high-speed rotation, it gradually slowed down until it finally stopped. However, Yu Qianqiu felt as if there was another him inside, ready to break out of the shell. Could it be that he was going to break through to the nascent soul stage? That's not right. How could it be so fast? Also, he had never heard of anyone absorbing so many spirit stones to break through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was a little confused. He did not even calculate how many spirit stones he had absorbed. Suddenly, there was a movement in his dantian, which immediately attracted his attention. A crack slowly appeared on the golden core suspended in his dantian. As time passed, the crack became bigger and bigger. After a long time, the golden core finally cracked open. A few pieces of the golden shell fell off, and turned into a golden mist. In an instant, the entire dantian was filled with golden mist. Within the golden mist, a baby with complete facial features and 4 limbs could be faintly seen. As the mist floated, the baby's eyes were tightly closed. He was quietly floating in the dantian with his legs crossed. Suddenly, the baby's delicate nose slightly moved. With a fierce breath, the golden mist that was floating in the surroundings was immediately sucked into the baby's body. He broke through. He really broke through to the nascent soul stage. Damn it. Yu Qianqiu could not say whether he was happy or not. He could only forcefully control his emotions. He carefully looked at the baby. He could clearly see that the baby's facial features were somewhat similar to his own. The baby had small arms and legs, and was strong and lovable. Suddenly, the baby sneezed fiercely, and two shiny little balls came out of his nostrils. One was red, and the other was black. What the hell is this? He had never heard of such a thing when breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He released his divine sense to touch it. After a little sensing, he immediately understood what was going on. The red one was actually a fire elemental crystal, and the black one was a water elemental crystal. At this moment, the baby who was sitting cross-legged in meditation yawned again. He saw that the spiritual energy in his dantian had been sucked into it. After a long time, he breathed out. However, when he breathed out the spiritual energy, it had already turned into a tiny wisp of true essence. Just like that, the little guy began his first breath. The spiritual energy was inhaled, and the true essence was exhaled. And just as he began to breathe, the red fire elemental crystal and the black water elemental crystal, one on the left and one on the right, began to slowly revolve around him. Chapter 307. What's going on? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback once again. He saw the golden bead, which had been circulating freely in his dantian, fly to the top of the nascent soul's head and stop. It only stopped for a moment before the golden bead slowly descended and touched the top of the nascent soul's head. In an instant, the golden bead emitted a brilliant light that illuminated his entire dantian. It pierced Yu Qianqiu's divine sense, causing him to feel a faint pain. He couldn't see anything, so he hurriedly retracted his divine sense and didn't dare to look anymore. It didn't matter if he couldn't see the movements in his dantian, but he felt that he couldn't move at all. It was as if something was slowly entering his brain. He wanted to circulate his energy to resist, but unfortunately his body was stiff. He could only accept the invasion of that thing. After a long while, he felt that the thing had completed its fusion with his brain. Once the fusion was successful, he immediately felt that he could move. He quickly sent his divine sense into his dantian, and saw that the golden bead had disappeared. Where did it go? Where did my golden bead go? Yu Qianqiu scanned his body with his divine sense. He was really anxious. Without the golden bead, how was he going to return to Utopia? By Suzhen, his parents, his family, Chu Ping-er and his army. No matter how his divine sense rumbled in his body, he couldn't find the mysterious golden bead. That's not right. When the golden bead was pressed on the nascent soul's head, he felt that something had fused with his brain. Could it be in the nascent soul's head? He kept thinking about the people in Utopia. The moment his divine sense touched the nascent soul's body, the scene in Utopia immediately appeared in front of him. His divine sense swept across Utopia to investigate. After confirming that he could still communicate with Utopia through the nascent soul, Yu Qianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief. It didn't matter if the golden bead was around. As long as he could return to Utopia, it was likely that the golden bead had fused with the nascent soul. Everything that happened in his dantian was too incredible. Once he successfully cultivated the water spell, the movement in his dantian was simply earth-shattering. He really couldn't figure it out and couldn't understand it. It involved a rather profound truth of the great Tao. He happened to practice the incantation of water and fire by chance, which implied the number of yin and yang. Together with the mysterious effect of the star bead, it immediately changed the core. It absorbed the spiritual aura crazily to complete its own evolution. As a result, the core took shape in advance, and Yu Qianqiu also broke through to the nascent soul stage in advance. What made Yu Qianqiu ecstatic was that his nascent soul was actually refining the spiritual qi and transforming it into true essence. Just like before, he didn't need to sit there and cultivate like an idiot. In fact, cultivation was really a boring thing. Once he got rid of the sea of suffering, he could free up time to do other things. The water ball enveloping him slowly retracted into his body, and he also sat on the ground. Yu Qianqiu, whose face was filled with joy, finally opened his eyes. He had successfully cultivated the water spell, and had broken through to the original infant stage. How could he not be happy? The night sky was bright with stars, and it was an enchanting night. Yu Qianqiu gazed at the enchanting starry sky, and the smile on his face gradually stiffened. F***ck. He suddenly let out a strange cry. He really didn't know how long he had been sitting there. What time was it now? And Bai Changchun had given him the task of taking care of the deficient flame profound fruit. He immediately jumped up high, and turned around, wanting to run towards the deficient flame profound fruit's garden. However, he saw Bai Changchun standing behind him, looking at him with sparkling eyes. Yu Qianqiu came to a sudden stop, and awkwardly bowed. Master, you've broken through to the early nascent soul stage? Bai Changchun asked, sizing him up. Yu Qianqiu respectfully replied, Yes, master. The jade archive was still on the ground. Bai Changchun raised his hand and took it. Is the incantation you're practicing related to the things inside? Yes, master. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, the things I've figured out are nothing in your eyes, so it doesn't matter if I tell you. Oh. What's so profound about this? Why can't even I understand it? Bai Changchun asked. Inside are the coordinates of the stars in the sky. The incantation this disciple created was precisely based on the stars in the sky. Speaking of which, it's also because of Master. Otherwise, this disciple wouldn't have thought of this. You're saying that the incantation you created is related to me? Bai Changchun revealed a doubtful expression. Yu Qianqiu smiled sheepishly. Master, you may not know this, but this disciple has a good relationship with the 4 great clans of the cultivation world. Once at the Wu clan's ancestral hall, I offered incense to Master. They all thought that Master had already passed away. To show my respect, this disciple also offered incense in front of Master's portrait. In the end, I heard the Wu clan talk about Master's past, saying that all of your incantation arts were comprehended from the way of heaven. I saw in the portrait that Master was looking up at the starry sky, so this disciple boldly guessed that the way of heaven that Master comprehended had something to do with the stars in the sky. As a result, this disciple often learned to look up at the stars, and in the end, accidentally comprehended some incantation arts and casually used it. Bai Changchun looked at Miao Yi with a rare look of astonishment. Then he sent his divine sense into the jade archive to examine it, then looked at the starry sky. Indeed, he found some similarities. He thought to himself, I haven't even taken him as my disciple, but because of one of my portraits, we're already destined to be master and disciple. It seems that taking him as my disciple is indeed the will of the heavens. He was worried that after he left, the demon domain would wreak havoc in the mortal realm. Who would have thought that the heavens would have their own plans? Bai Changchun was overwhelmed with emotions. He took a few light steps forward and stood by the lake. He placed the hand holding the jade archive behind his back and gazed at the starry sky, remaining silent for a long time. Yu Qianqiu saw that Miao Yi seemed to be deep in thought, so he didn't dare to disturb him. Thus he obediently stood behind Miao Yi and accompanied him. In the end, Miao Yi stood there until dawn. It was only when the sky was enveloped by the morning glow that Bai Changchun turned around and handed the jade archive back to Yu Qianqiu. He said, This is your destiny. Even I can't pry into it. You must cultivate well, and be kind to your destiny. After saying this, he slowly walked away by himself. Holding the jade archive in his hands, Yu Qianqiu was stunned. I've waited so long to talk to you. How can I let you off so easily? He couldn't help but call out, Master. Hearing this, Bai Changchun turned around and asked, Is something the matter? Yu Qianqiu ran over eagerly. After dawdling for a while, he was a little embarrassed to speak. If you have something to say it, Bai Changchun said. That. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, This disciple's cultivation is still shallow. Can Master teach me a few powerful techniques so that I can protect myself? He was filled with admiration for Bai Changchun's amazing feats. It would be wonderful if he could learn a few powerful techniques. When the time came, he could defeat all the experts from the various sects in the cultivation world within 3 moves. Moreover, he had to do it openly. Then, his name would definitely shake the world, and he would become the strongest leader in the cultivation world. Haven't you already figured out a suitable technique for yourself? Why do you still want to learn from me? Bai Changchun asked. Damn it. If I don't want to learn from you, why did you take me in as your disciple? Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, This little trick of mine is nothing in front of Master. How can it compare to Master's profound techniques? This disciple truly wishes to learn them. Little trick? Is this supreme and holy technique that can borrow the power of the origin of heaven and earth a little trick? Bai Changchun retorted. He looked at him seriously and said, Yu Qianqiu, listen carefully. From what I can see, the technique you've figured out is the true holy technique of the Great Path. It's much stronger than what I figured out. I can't wait to be envious. Why do you want to neglect the essentials? Chapter 308. Origin of Heaven and Earth? Holy and Supreme? Is it that powerful? Yu Qianqiu's tone was a little doubtful. Bai Changchun nodded. You don't have to doubt this. I can tell from your ability to control fire and water that it's not because your cultivation level is high enough to control them, but because the technique you practice allows you to easily use the origin of fire and water. The fire and water are you, and you are the fire and water. The origin of fire and water have already become one with you, and you can summon them at will. It's so mysterious that it allows you to use it as you please. How can it not be powerful? Although what he said was reasonable, Yu Qianqiu's level was still too far away from what he knew. He didn't care whether it was one or not, or whether it was mysterious or not. To put it bluntly, he still didn't understand how powerful it was. Yu Qianqiu frowned, his face full of confusion. You still don't understand? Bai Changchun saw it too. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and answered honestly, I am ignorant, I don't understand. Bai Changchun paused and asked, How is Heli's cultivation compared to yours? Not as good as Heli. When I fought him before, he was already in the middle stage of the passing calamity stage. I was only in the late stage of the core formation stage. I was 5 stages lower than him. You were able to kill someone in the middle stage of the passing calamity stage when you were in the late stage of the core formation stage. Can't you see how powerful your technique is? At the very least, when I was in the late stage of the core formation stage, I couldn't kill someone in the late stage of the passing calamity stage. Master, this is different. Healy didn't die to my technique, but to Qinghuo's tyranny. If it wasn't for this disciple's plan, no matter how powerful Qinghuo was, he wouldn't have been able to touch him, let alone kill him. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. He was aware of his own limitations. What's the difference? In the end, Heli still lost to your fire technique. It really is different. Master, Heli didn't react in time. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. If Healy's cultivation had already reached the final stage of crossing tribulation, he would have been able to use teleportation to escape once he realized that something was amiss. I wouldn't have been able to hurt him, let alone kill him. At that time, I would have been killed. Truly a piece of rotten wood. Guarding a treasure mountain without knowing how to use it. Bai Changchun sighed and said, In this world, no matter how powerful the incantation is, no matter who has it, the one who can use it well will be invincible. If one can't use it well, no matter how powerful the incantation is, it's useless. Yu Qianqiu, since you know that it was your own scheme and Qinghuo's tyranny that killed Healy, you should understand that the most powerful magic art is to use it well, not the magic art itself. Damn it. Who didn't know how to talk about principles? No matter how good Laozi was, it was impossible for him to split a mountain in half with one sword strike. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and said, Disciple has 2 questions that I would like Master to clear up. Speak. Bai Changchun looked at him with deep meaning in his eyes. He understood that if he didn't explain things clearly today, even if Yu Qianqiu accepted it verbally, he wouldn't be convinced in his heart. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, First question. If Disciple didn't practice the fire incantation that day when I fought with Healy, but used the water incantation that I had just mastered, how could Disciple defeat him? Second question. Disciple recently saw a stone mountain that had been split in half by someone. I heard that it was split by Master's sword strike. Disciple knows that even if I was good at using it, I wouldn't be able to split such a large stone mountain with one sword strike. To be able to use such a tyrannical sword strike, I'm afraid that Master's cultivation base and the incantation that you practice must have something to do with it. Do you know about Master's cultivation experience? Master might as well tell you about it. A faint smile appeared on Bai Changchun's face as he stood by the lake with his hands behind his back. He looked at the distant horizon and said in an aged voice, "More than 2,000 years ago, I was a young scholar who came to the capital to take the imperial examination. At that time, my greatest desire was to be nominated for the imperial examination and bring honor to my ancestors. However, the affairs of the world are unpredictable. Because I was drenched in the rain before the examination, I fell seriously ill and entered the examination hall with a serious illness. Naturally, I didn't make it to the imperial examination hall. Feeling ashamed, I felt that I couldn't face my hometown elders again, so I had the idea of committing suicide. I stumbled and found a cliff and jumped down." Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded when he heard this. This torturer, who was famous in the demon ghost region, had committed suicide by jumping off a cliff when he was young? But what did he mean by telling me this? Could it be that he had picked up some secret manual at the foot of the mountain, or met some otherworldly expert or something? As you can see, I'm naturally not dead since I'm standing here. After jumping off the cliff, I was lucky enough to fall into a deep pool. After experiencing life to death and then back to life again, I no longer had the thought of seeking death. However, I was trapped in the cliff and couldn't get out. There was a dead body at the foot of the cliff. I picked up a book beside him and opened it. It was about the method of cultivation. Here it comes, here it comes. I really picked up a secret manual. I'm going to find a few cliffs to jump off one day. Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up. At that time, I knew nothing about the cultivation world. After reading the contents of the book, I thought it was a wonderful method of immortals, and was extremely happy. Later, I learned that it was just a manual for beginners in cultivation. At the time, I cultivated under the cliff and stayed there for more than 10 years. When I was thirsty, I drank from the mountain spring. When I was hungry, I ate wild fruits to fill my stomach. Just like that, I managed to cultivate to the 10th rank of qi condensation. That was the end of the contents of the scroll. However, by chance, I accidentally ate a spirit fruit. Just like that, I unknowingly broke through to foundation establishment. Hehe. Master is really lucky. In order to reach the foundation establishment realm, I suffered a lot. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. When I buried the dead body, I took his sword. With my foundation establishment realm cultivation, I comprehended the sword kinesis technique and flew out of the cliff. At that time, when I saw that I could fly, I thought that I had already learned the wonderful method of immortals and became an immortal. After I came out, I secretly returned home. In the end, I found that the whole village had been destroyed by the flames of war. Since then, I used my foundation establishment realm cultivation to wander around. Later, when I met some people in the cultivation world, I realized how insignificant I was. I was originally just a foundation establishment realm rogue cultivator, without a sect. After the foundation establishment realm, there are even higher realms. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun with a strange expression. He thought to himself, a little foundation establishment realm cultivator without any ability actually dared to run around. He's really lucky that he didn't get killed. During those years in the cultivation world, I did indeed suffer a lot. But I thought those cultivation sects cultivation arts are also created by people. It's not like they're born with it. Why can't I create my own cultivation art? Besides, my sword kinesis technique was originally created by me, so it's not something that's impossible to achieve. With this thought, I traveled around the world alone, concentrating on observing the things and things around me. Master's ambition is indeed not something ordinary people can reach. Yu Qianqiu didn't miss the opportunity to flatter him. Unfortunately, the effect was not very good. Bai Changchun didn't even look at him and continued. I watched the sea and clouds, the sunrise and sunset, the movement of the stars, the rise and fall of the sea, the ferocious beasts hunting in the deep mountains, the goshawks hunting rabbits in the grasslands, the thunderbolts in the rainy night, the dragonflies skimming the surface of the water by the pond, the water dripping through the stone under the eaves, the people coming and going in the busy city, the two armies fighting on the battlefield. After so many years, I had a lot of enlightenment. Once I understood it, my cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and I became who I am today. Hearing that his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He swallowed his saliva and said, "Master, can you teach me the cultivation art you've comprehended? I sincerely want to learn it." "You still don't understand what I mean?" Bai Changchun turned around and looked at him with his bright eyes. "Damn it. Who the hell can understand what you're talking about? Jumping off a cliff, looking at the stars, looking at the pond, and watching rabbits? You can't possibly ask me to go and look at them all just because I'm full. I definitely won't be able to tell." Yu Qianqiu grumbled in his heart. He said respectfully, "I'm really foolish. I've left my cultivation art behind in the 4 great clans. Do you know why none of them could comprehend it?" Bai Changchun asked. "I don't know," Yu Qianqiu answered straightforwardly. He thought to himself, "Old man, can't you just explain things clearly? There's a generation gap of more than 2,000 years between us. It's really hard to communicate. I don't even know why you're talking so much nonsense. You're really foolish. Don't you understand? Your master's cultivation art doesn't have any fixed cultivation art. It's based on the Tao of heaven and earth. Everything in the world has its own Tao. I can borrow and use anything that's in common. This is your master's Tao to defeat the enemy. It's also why no one in the 4 great clans could learn it. My Tao relies on comprehension, not learning." Bai Changchun looked at him and sighed. "Everything in the world has its own origin. Your master can only borrow it, but you can possess it. The difference between the two is obvious. If you borrow it, you'll be restricted, but if you possess it, you can do as you please." This time, Yu Qianqiu finally understood a little. He fell into deep thought. Bai Changchun looked at him and shook his head. He turned around and pointed at the lake. He said, "This water looks calm and doesn't have any power. However, as long as you use it well, it can be ever-changing. Its power can reach the heavens. Why can't it defeat the enemy? You've comprehended the water art, but you can't feel it or use its power. This means that you can't use it well. This can be seen from your clumsy technique of controlling fire. Yu Qianqiu, watch carefully now. Your master wants to borrow this lake water and display its power. I'll only do it once. Whether you can comprehend it or not depends on yourself." Chapter 309. Holy **T. A super expert was about to perform. He couldn't miss this opportunity. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened immediately. He had been dragged down from the sky by Bai Changchun twice. Although he had experienced it himself, he had never seen Bai Changchun fight. He had only heard of it from a distant legend. Just as Bai Changchun finished speaking, Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank suddenly. He couldn't see anything else in his eyes. The old figure in front of him seemed to have merged with heaven and earth in an instant. Or rather, heaven and earth had merged with him. Only he could be seen standing there. The whole world seemed to have quietened down. The surrounding air seemed to have solidified. Yu Qianqiu felt suffocated. He couldn't even breathe. He was about to be swallowed by that suffocating feeling. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of white cloth. Gradually he couldn't see anything. In a moment of desperation, he bit the tip of his tongue. A sharp pain woke him up. The salty taste in his mouth told him that he had bitten his tongue. However, he finally woke up from that feeling of sinking to death. His eyes also regained clarity. Oh my God! He hadn't even made a move. With just a thought, the aura he emitted could kill people invisibly. It was no wonder that he could seriously injure a group of crossing tribulation stage experts from Fuxian Island, who broke into the demon ghost region with just his divine sense. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath. He looked around and felt his heart palpitate. The rippling lake surface had completely calmed down. It was as clean as a mirror. Although he couldn't see the lake surface far away, at least he could see it. The surrounding flowers and trees swaying in the wind were as still as statues. The gentle breeze had disappeared. The palpitating feeling grew stronger. Yu Qianqiu didn't even dare to breathe. He knew that Bai Changchun was about to make a move. The palpitating feeling was a sign that he was about to make a move. He moved. Bai Changchun casually waved his hand, and the surface of the lake beneath his feet rippled, slowly spreading into the distance. At first, nothing special could be seen, but as the ripples pushed out layer by layer, the ripples that rolled into the distance gradually turned into waves. Layer by layer, the waves finally formed into waves that surged into the distance, and the waves piled up higher and higher. Yu Qianqiu looked around. He guessed that it wasn't just in front of him. The waves were spreading with Shuntian Island as the center. What was the old thing doing? Yu Qianqiu couldn't understand. Looking around, the waves had already rolled for nearly a kilometer, and the height of the waves was probably close to 100 meters. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's head shook left and right. He looked around and then looked straight ahead. The waves seemed to be blocked by something a kilometer away. It was the same for the places he could see to his left and right. Hua! Standing on the island, one could hear the sound of the waves crashing into each other. One could see the waves crashing into each other. With a reverse roll, the 100-meter-high waves quickly swayed back. Hua! Rumble! The 100-meter-high waves were originally spreading in all directions. Due to the shrinking of the circle, the centripetal force generated was not small. This was like a bucket of water. When you punch it, the water will rush in all directions. But when it hits the wall of the bucket, the water will return to the center point. The 200 to 300-meter high waves came crashing back towards Shuntian Island with a deafening sound. The momentum was even more terrifying than standing in front of a tsunami. At the very least, a tsunami wouldn't be able to create such a high wave. The huge waves rushed over. If one wanted to see the white waves, they would have to raise their heads. Yu Qianqiu could feel the Shuntian Island shaking. He looked at Bai Changchun in fear. What was this old man trying to do? If he didn't know that the deficient flame profound fruit was still on the island, Yu Qianqiu would have already escaped with his sword. With such a huge wave rushing over, the pressure it produced was more than 10,000 caddies. With his current cultivation, even if he didn't die, he would not be far from it. Just when the wave was less than 100 meters away from Shuntian Island, Bai Changchun flashed his palms and fiercely pushed against the huge wave. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know how powerful his palms were, he was still forced back a dozen steps by the aura released from his palms. His blood and qi were in turmoil. Two huge handprints suddenly appeared on the wave wall a few hundred meters in front of them, forcibly stopping the advance of the huge wave. Who knew how much strength was needed to do that? Suddenly, Bai Changchun swung his arms left and right. When the huge wave was about to reach Shuntian Island, it suddenly received a heavy blow. The wave that was formed instantly collapsed and retreated into the distance. That casual swing of his arms seemed elegant, but it was unknown how much energy was contained in it to be able to repel such a huge wave in an instant. The crisis was resolved just like that? Good heavens! Yu Qianqiu looked at both sides, and his heart was thumping hard. This old guy was too awesome. No wonder he was a late-stage deity transformation cultivator. He really had the ability to overturn rivers and seas. As soon as he looked in front of him, Yu Qianqiu was immediately stunned. An ice wall that was nearly 100 meters high was floating on the surface of the water. It was sparkling and translucent under the sunlight, and there were even frozen fish inside. This was clearly the place where Bai Changchun had blocked the wave with his palms. The two huge handprints were still there. Although it was nearly 100 meters away from Shuntian Island, the dense white cold air had already begun to close in. It had instantly solidified into ice, and it was such a big piece. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his eyes several times in disbelief. After confirming that there was no doubt, he speechlessly looked at Bai Changchun. He really didn't understand what he meant by doing this. Could it be that he wanted to show off his cultivation? Bai Changchun turned his head to look at him and said indifferently, "Weak water can also turn into raging waves. Formless can also turn into tangible forms. Then he flicked 2 fingers at the edge of the lake. With a light flick, a pillar of water jumped out of the lake and circled around the surface of the lake like a dragon. Suddenly, it ferociously attacked Yu Qianqiu. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu cried out in shock. Master, what are you doing? Before he could even take a few steps, he was entangled by the water dragon. It coiled around his body, and in an instant, he was completely wrapped up. Inside the water dragon, Yu Qianqiu was struggling with his eyes closed. Suddenly, his mouth opened wide and his eyes widened, revealing an expression of disbelief. The water that was wrapped around him also fell to the ground with a hua sound. The moment he was enveloped by the water, Yu Qianqiu felt the water drilling into his 7 orifices. It was fine if the water entered his mouth and nose, but if it entered his eyes and ears, it would be terrible. This was not the same as when water entered his eyes and ears when he was swimming. He would become deaf and blind. Therefore, he immediately used his internal energy to resist. Who knew that the despicable water would not let go of his buttocks? His buttocks felt cold, and he was immediately shocked. Fortunately, Bai Changchun was lenient. Otherwise, he would be the first man in history to be raped by water. Yu Qianqiu stood there like a drowned rat. A pair of dead fish eyes stared at Bai Changchun. He bit his lips and held back the word despicable, but he did not dare to say it out loud. Water is invisible, but it can penetrate through any hole. Bai Changchun said indifferently. He stretched out 2 fingers and flicked at the surface of the lake again. This time, 2 water pillars jumped out and turned into 2 swimming dragons. Again, Yu Qianqiu immediately panicked. With an extremely miserable voice, he quickly begged for mercy. Master, your power is boundless, please spare me. However, the 2 water dragons did not give him any face at all. They quickly pounced on him and circled around him, tearing off his clothes. Then, he turned into 2 puddles of water and fell to the ground. Yu Qianqiu was so embarrassed that his face turned green. His hands covered the important parts of his lower body, and he was about to go berserk. Fortunately, no one was watching. In the end, he hurriedly took out a set of clothes from the storage bag on the ground and quickly put them on. Water is weak, but it can also be powerful. Bai Changchun's tone was still calm. He flicked his finger, and a water pillar that was much bigger than the previous 2 jumped out of the lake. Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately widened. He saw that the water pillar had turned into a sharp icicle. Bai Changchun waved his hand, and the icicle made a hoo sound. It quickly shot towards the huge floating ice that was almost 100 meters away. With a loud hong sound, the floating ice collapsed into a few pieces and swayed on the surface of the water. When water turns into ice, it can also subdue the enemy. Bai Changchun said indifferently as he looked at the collapsed floating ice. It was not targeted at him. Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Bai Changchun turned around, looked at him and said, Now, do you still think that the water art is useless? The key is how you use it. I can do this just by borrowing the water. You have the source, so you should be able to display an even greater advantage. Of course, it is a fact that my cultivation is higher than yours, but that is only in terms of power. In terms of using it, you should be better than me. Disciple understands. Disciple will definitely try to figure it out. Yu Qianqiu's expression was full of grievance. He decided in his heart that he would not tell anyone about what happened today, even if he was beaten to death. Also, your method of controlling fire is extremely clumsy. With such a tyrannical green fire, why do you only know how to set it on fire? You can control 100 swords at the same time. So why can't you use fire to control swords? Why don't you put more effort into this? I believe that your power will definitely increase greatly. Bai Changchun taught. It could be said that this was the first time he taught someone like this. In the past, although He Li was also his disciple, he had never enjoyed this kind of treatment. It was clear that he saw Yu Qianqiu in a different light. He still needed to ponder over the previous words, but this sentence immediately sank in. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he thought to himself, That's right. Why didn't I think of that? If I changed the sword control to the green fire control, then wouldn't I be killing my enemies everywhere? The old man was indeed an old man. His foresight was indeed unique. Disciple will remember master's teachings. Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully. His previous unhappiness immediately disappeared. Bai Changchun nodded and said, "Based on my many years of cultivation experience in this world, there should be more than 2 types of fire and water sources. I estimate that there should be 5 types. You were able to understand 2 types, so you can more or less comprehend things that others don't know. If you have the heart, you can try to understand the other types of sources." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was filled with deep respect and immediately bowed deeply. In this world, there was no such thing as the 5 elements, but the old man was actually able to understand it. It was really not simple. "All right, I have said what I need to say. You practice diligently. When the time is right, I will let you go out and do some things for master." Bai Changchun turned around and slowly walked towards the center of the island. As he walked, he did not forget to remind him, "I have already taken care of the deficient flame profound fruit for you for 20 days. If you dare to be lazy again, I will not forgive you." Disciple will not dare again. Yu Qianqiu bowed to send him off. He thought to himself, "These words don't make sense. I am obviously helping you take care of it. How did it become you helping me take care of it?" After he got up, he was stunned again. 20 days had already passed? Adding on the days that he had wasted before, tomorrow would be the beginning of the month. It was the day that he had arranged to meet with the Demon Kings and the Ghost King. Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sun in the sky and walked towards the vegetable garden with a smile on his face. Not only did he successfully cultivate the water arts, he was also able to receive guidance from the old man. This old man with a cultivation level of soul formation final stage was really powerful. With just a casual guidance he had benefited a lot. However, he did not know what kind of things he wanted him to do. He also did not know if it would be dangerous or not. Chapter 310. After replenishing the spirit stones for the deficient flame profound fruit, Yu Qianqiu returned to the lakeside where Bai Changchun had demonstrated and sat down cross-legged. He carefully recalled Bai Changchun's every move. Although the huge ice floe had been smashed into pieces, it still had a considerable volume floating on the surface of the lake. Under the scorching sun, the sparkling and translucent ice gradually melted. Water droplets dripped from the edges and corners of the ice floe, splashing on the surface of the lake. The cracked ice floe swayed not far from the shore. After witnessing Bai Changchun's momentum, which could overturn rivers and seas with a wave of his hand, Yu Qianqiu no longer doubted that he could split a mountain with a single sword strike. However, he couldn't figure out how he could instantly turn water into ice. What's more, it was such a large piece. Bai Changchun said he could do it too. Yu Qianqiu knitted his brows tightly as his gaze fell on the floating ice that was drifting closer and closer. Suddenly, he stood up abruptly and hurriedly took a few steps forward. His feet stomped on the shore and his body shot out gracefully. He somersaulted several times in the air and flew diagonally to the largest floating ice that was more than 20 meters tall and 30 meters away from the shore. Standing on the floating ice floe, Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look at the spot where he had jumped 30 meters away. A smile appeared on his face. Presumably, if he used all his strength to jump, he should be able to cross 50 meters with the help of inertia. With this distance, he would definitely be considered a top-notch Qigong expert in the secular world. He had never practiced Qigong in the secular world. Being able to jump so far was naturally related to his cultivation reaching the nascent soul stage. At the very least, when he was at the core formation stage, he wouldn't have been able to jump so far. Remembering that he could already fly after reaching the nascent soul stage, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He casually took out a jade archive from his storage pouch. The contents of the archive were all stolen from the cultivation pavilion of Fuxian Island. There was a method to fly after reaching the nascent soul stage. For someone who had already reached the nascent soul stage, this was not a very profound method. It was just a technique to grasp. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive and circulated his quintessential essence around his body, controlling his body to maintain a delicate relationship with the air. His feet gradually left the floating ice, and he slowly floated up into the air. However, his shaky appearance showed that he was not proficient enough. After tossing and turning for a while, he could barely raise his body to a height of 20 meters in the air. It was even more difficult for him to fly. Moving left and right was no different from crawling. How could it be considered flying? Now he finally understood why most of the nascent soul stage cultivators still couldn't use sword kinesis flight. The key was that their cultivation wasn't high enough. Only when their cultivation was high enough to control their body in the air would they be able to truly fly. If that didn't work, then flying on the sword would be faster than before. Yu Qianqiu struggled to maintain his balance in the air. The long sword on his back shot out with a clang, and a cold light drew a half arc in the air, supporting him steadily. His feet sank, and with a single thought, the flying sword carried him diagonally up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a black dot. Not long after, the black dot grew larger. Yu Qianqiu turned sideways, stepping on the sword with his hands behind his back. His clothes and long hair fluttered behind him as he broke through the air, rushing towards the floating ice he had been standing on earlier. Just as they were about to collide, Yu Qianqiu quickly shot up from the flying sword and transformed into a human silhouette, falling towards the lake. The cold light turned and flashed to chase after him, once again supporting him. A human silhouette could be seen darting in and out of the fragmented floating ice, extremely nimble and fast. Finally, he flew in circles around the largest floating ice. Abruptly, Yu Qianqiu shot up again, spreading his arms wide as he landed lightly in the middle of the floating ice. Just as he landed, the flying sword quickly chased after him. With a clang, it returned to its scabbard and quieted down along with him. Awesome! A nascent soul cultivator's flying sword was indeed incomparable to a core formation cultivator's. Yu Qianqiu relaxed and let out a breath. His gaze fell on the huge floating ice, and his brows furrowed again. Since he cultivated the water art, controlling water shouldn't be a problem. However, how did he turn water into ice? Yu Qianqiu slowly walked to the edge of the floating ice, his gaze wandering between the floating ice and the lake water. He believed that since Bai Changqun said he could do it, then he would definitely be able to do it. Yu Qianqiu released his divine sense into the lake water. A sense of intimacy arose spontaneously, as if the lake water was a part of his body. Suddenly, following the teasing of his fingers, streams of clear lake water jumped out of the lake and fell back down, making dong 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 sounds. When his divine sense wandered to the point where the floating ice and the lake water met, his fingers suddenly stopped teasing. At this moment, Bai Changqun's voice suddenly rang in his ears, reminding him in a timely manner. Everything has two sides. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. So stupid. Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead and suddenly came to a realization. The reason why water could freeze was naturally because of the low temperature. He cultivated the fire art, so controlling temperature was his forte. If he could control it well, he could make the surrounding temperature frighteningly high. And if he absorbed the temperature, he could naturally lower the surrounding temperature. Wasn't this the opposite of things? Thank you for your advice, master. Yu Qianqiu bowed towards the center of the island. With a backhand gesture, he raised his hand towards the surface of the lake. With a xiu sound, a stream of lake water flew over and formed a water ball in his palm. Holding the water ball in his palm, he circulated the fire art, and the temperature in his palm rapidly decreased. In an instant, a dense white gas appeared, and a crystal-clear ice ball was formed in the blink of an eye. And the temperature that was absorbed into his palm was instantly swallowed up by the fire element, becoming a tonic for the green fire element. This bit of temperature was simply too insignificant when integrated into the green fire element. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. So that's how it is, so that's how it is. Haha. Yu Qianqiu danced excitedly. He casually threw the ice ball and summoned the lake water to test it out. All kinds of ice crystals were formed in his hands. In the end, he became more and more proficient. Raising both of his palms, 10 water pillars emerged from the lake. Both of his hands stretched out 2 fingers and quickly pointed at the 10 water pillars. In the blink of an eye, ice pillars were formed and fell back into the water. Satisfying. Yu Qianqiu let out a hollow cry and suddenly jumped straight towards the surface of the water under the ice flow. The moment his feet touched the surface of the water, white frost immediately appeared on the surface of the water, crackling and spreading in all directions. Not long after, the ice flow within a radius of a few hundred meters was instantly frozen by the ice formed on the surface of the water. Yu Qianqiu cheered excitedly on the layer of ice. It was hard not to be happy about this kind of magic that almost conquered the laws of nature. Just like what Bai Changchun had said, as long as it was used properly, it would definitely have a miraculous effect in future conflicts. As the saying goes, once you understand one thing, all will follow. From this, Yu Qianqiu thought that even if he didn't absorb the fire element in the future, he would probably be able to create fire out of thin air just by absorbing the temperature of the surroundings. Of course, this kind of fire couldn't be compared to a heavenly fire like the blue fire. After his emotions calmed down a little, he suddenly thought of something. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a little strange. Bai Changchun hadn't cultivated the fire spell before, so how did he turn such a huge wave into ice in an instant? Even he couldn't do it with his current cultivation. Such a huge wave hitting him, not to mention turning him into ice, he was afraid that the huge force generated would be enough to slap him half to death. He thought for a moment and had a guess. Bai Changchun always talked about the heavenly Tao, so his understanding of the natural climate change was definitely not something that others could compare to. He must have used his profound cultivation to instantly create an extreme difference in the temperature, and quickly turn the huge wave into ice. If that was really the case, Yu Qianqiu shuddered. He didn't know about other soul formation stage cultivators, but that old man's cultivation was really too terrifying. Because of his previous comprehension, his guess was correct. The method that Bai Changchun used was exactly the same as he thought. But it was also because he knew the reason behind it that he was able to understand even more how terrifying Bai Changchun was. A huge wave that reached the sky turned into ice in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and decided not to think about it anymore. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he felt. The more he thought about it, the more insignificant he felt. He raised his palm, and with a buzz, a faint blue flame ignited. He looked around at the ice floating around him and thought, I should just listen to the old man's words, and try to use the Guiyuan sword technique to control the blue fire. Chapter 311. The 1,000-mile lake, in front of Obedient Island, was a small world of ice. A few huge ice floes were already connected together by the ice on the surface of the lake. The snow-white lake, the sparkling and translucent ice floes, under the illumination of the sun. The small world was completely different from the surrounding environment. Yu Qianqiu stood on the surface of the frozen lake, standing in the middle of a few huge ice floes. 100 balls of green flame floated around him, and under the illumination of the green flame, the surrounding ice floes also reflected an enchanting green radiance. Damn it! Directly using fire to attack is too slow, and the larger the size, the greater the resistance. Looks like I have to compress the green flame into the shape of a flying sword. Yu Qianqiu frowned as he muttered to himself. His hands quickly formed a series of hand seals, and the 100 balls of green flame slowly lengthened. After many experiments, he finally managed to compress the green flame into the shape of a flying sword. He pointed at one of the ice floes, and a green flying sword shot out, silently piercing through the ice floes. Recalling the flying sword, Yu Qianqiu frowned again. Although the problem of speed was solved, the ice floes were not pierced by the flying sword itself. Instead, it was because the flying sword was compressed by the green flame, and the high temperature melted a hole in the ice floes. This was not the result he wanted. Since he was going to make the green flame into a flying sword, he had to make it look like a real flying sword. Otherwise, it would be inconvenient for him to launch a sneak attack. Just think about it. If someone discovered that there was something strange about the sword, they would definitely be on guard. With a series of hand seals, the 99 flying sword shot towards him, and instantly disappeared into his body. Only one flying sword floated in front of him, and he needed to concentrate on studying it. He was currently making adjustments to the fire, and his hand seals were moving like shadows. After a long time, he suddenly pointed 2 fingers at one of the ice floes, and lightly shouted, "Go!" A cold azure light flashed, and a crisp ding sound rang out. Half of the azure flying sword's body was inserted into the floating ice, and the other half with the hilt was trembling nonstop. Success. Yu Qianqiu looked at the flying sword with a smug smile. Then he spun around on the ice like a spinning top. Swish swish. In the blink of an eye, his body emitted countless green lights. When he stopped, there were already 99 green flying swords revolving around him. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and hooked 2 of his fingers. Then he pulled out the flying sword that was stuck in the floating ice with a schwa sound. A green light flashed, and the 100th flying sword appeared beside him. "Go!" Yu Qianqiu shouted and waved both his arms. Green light shot out in all directions, and the huge floating ice on the surface of the ice immediately became the target of the flying swords. For a time the green light flashed, and ding ding dang dang, sounds rang out incessantly. Not long after, the surface of the ice was covered with chunks of broken ice. Burn! Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes, opened his arms, and muttered to himself. Boom! The 100 scattered flying swords instantly exploded into raging flames. The green and demonic raging flames instantly turned the cool world into a place that could burn everything. Not even a piece of ice could be found in the surroundings. The water that appeared instantly melted into the lake, and created quite a bit of waves. Yu Qianqiu calmly stood on the surface of the water, and didn't sink, moving up and down with the waves. When he put his hands behind his back, the green flames surged into his body, and the 1,000-mile lake returned to its original appearance. There were no floating ice, no raging flames, and everything was as it was before. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the house in the center of the island, smiled, and slightly nodded his head. He opened his mouth and transmitted his voice. "Come here." This transmission was naturally sent to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was secretly enjoying the aftertaste of the lake, opened his eyes in a daze. The long sword on his back was unsheathed, and a cold light shot into the water, carrying him to the center of the island. Putting away the sword, he quickly walked into the main hall, bowed and said, "Master, you were looking for me?" Bai Changchun opened his eyes and expressionlessly said, "Yu Qianqiu, are you willing to sincerely worship me as your master?" "What is this? Didn't I already worship you as my master long ago?" Yu Qianqiu's face was full of doubt. Disciple is naturally sincere. "I will give you one more chance to choose. Think carefully. Once you truly become my disciple, there will be a heavy burden on you, and it will be difficult for you to escape for the rest of your life. Think carefully now, think carefully. Don't worry, if you are not willing, I will not make things difficult for you. I will naturally let you out of the demon region. And from then on, there will be no more relationship between us." Bai Changchun said indifferently, "Fuck. So I wasn't your real disciple before." Yu Qianqiu's expression was a little strange, and he asked, "Master, disciple has something to ask you." "Speak." Bai Changchun replied. "Dare I ask, Master, was the previous Cranely your real disciple?" Yu Qianqiu hesitated for a while, but still opened his mouth. This question was very important to him. If the Cranely had the same status as him, then it would not be a big deal. However, if the Cranely was Bai Changchun's real disciple as a master, it would be very difficult for him to accept the fact that his disciple was killed, even if the disciple had made a huge mistake. He never thought of himself as a good person, but he always had his own bottom line, and he had his own judgment of right and wrong. There were some things that he could pretend to be courteous, but he could not accept. The Cranely was originally a white crane that the previous punishment envoy raised on Obedient Island, when I took over the demon region. After he cultivated to become a spirit, he became my mount, and after taking human form, he became my disciple. He was not a real disciple in the sense of a master and disciple. He's the same as you right now. He's just a nominal disciple of mine. I've never taught him anything, so we're not truly master and disciple in the truest sense of the word. Do you have any more questions? Bai Changchun's tone was very calm. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief, but he still asked in doubt. I have not been in contact with you for a long time, but the Cranley has been with you for so many years. Why did you not take him as your disciple? There is no why, no why. Bai Changchun looked at him and said slowly, the reason is very simple. He is too distant and cares too much about the difference between humans and demons, so he became disloyal. I knew this a long time ago, and it was not because you exposed me. However, he has been with me for many years, and I have always given him opportunities. Otherwise, I would have killed him long ago, and you would not have had the chance to do it. So that was why. Yu Qianqiu nodded and continued to ask, you just said that after becoming your true disciple, I will have a heavy responsibility, and it will be difficult for me to get rid of it for the rest of my life. Can I know what this heavy responsibility is? No, this is something my disciple should know. You do not have the right to know, and you do not need to know. Bai Changchun refused without hesitation and asked, have you thought it through? I will ask you one last time. Are you willing to take me as your master? F***ck. Such an important question. If you don't tell me, what if you send me to my death? Yu Qianqiu thought about it, and still felt that following him had more advantages than disadvantages, so he bowed deeply and said, this disciple is willing. Bai Changchun nodded with satisfaction, and stretched out his hand to point in front of him, and said, kneel, perform the ceremony of taking me as your master. At this time Yu Qianqiu's mentality was a little desperate, and he took a few steps forward, kneeled down and cupped his fists and said, this disciple greets master. After saying that, he kowtowed 3 times. All right, sit down. Didn't you want to know what kind of heavy responsibility you will have to shoulder? Sit down. Master will slowly tell you. Bai Changchun pointed at the place where Yu Qianqiu was kneeling. Chapter 312. Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged and Bai Changchun asked, what do you think of my cultivation? The former smiled and said, I can't say, but it's very high. It's the highest I've ever seen. The latter wasn't modest and nodded. After my cultivation level reached the late deity transformation stage, people at this level called me the #1 expert in the world. There were also people who called me the #1 expert in the cultivation world. Although such a title is somewhat suspicious, I believe that I still have no match in the deity transformation stage. I'm telling you this not to boast, but to let you know that it won't be a disgrace to you to have me as your master. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little dizzy. The world's #1 expert and the cultivation world's #1. These titles were really awesome. Awesome people really deserved awesome titles. He knew that Bai Changchun's cultivation was high, but he hadn't seen other soul formation experts, so he couldn't compare. He didn't expect his master to be the world's #1 expert. He remembered that his first master, Hao Sansi, was only at the nascent soul stage, his second master was at the tribulation passing stage, and his third master was at the soul formation stage. His masters came one after another, and their cultivation levels were higher than the one before. Unfortunately, none of them taught him anything. He didn't know if he would have a fourth master, but this master was already the world's #1 expert. According to the speed of his progress, would he have to become an Immortal's master in the future? Wouldn't it be a bit too shameless to always have a master like this? Who cares? Hirogua has more masters in the Condor Shooting League. He has more than 70 masters and I only have 3. It's not much. Didn't sage Confucius say that among 3 people, there must be a master? Damn it. I respect the ancient teachings more than the ancient teachings. Among 3 people, all of them are my masters. That's humble enough, right? With a reason to comfort himself, Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Master, it's my honor to have you as my master. How can it be a disgrace to me? Bai Changchun nodded and didn't dwell on this topic. He asked, do you know the origin of this demon domain? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, I don't know, I'd like to hear the details. Have you heard of the war in the ancient times? Bai Changchun smiled and asked. Then do you know why there was such a war? Yu Qianqiu shook his head again. It has been more than 100,000 years since the war. At that time, there was no demon domain. At that time, Humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted and went their own ways. Until one day, for some unknown reason, the immortals from the upper realm came alone, or in groups of 3 to 5. There were even many who came riding on divine beasts from the upper realm. One after another, they descended into the human world and started fighting, causing chaos in the human world. Demons and ghosts ran amok, and the people had no way to live. Under the temptation of the previous immortals, the cultivators in the human world also joined in. Bai Changchun said with a sigh. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows, and his expression was a little strange. Judging from the old man's expression, he didn't seem to be bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying mankind. Nor was he worried about the misfortune of the common people. Why did it feel like he was born at the wrong time? Could it be that the old man had been a loner seeker for defeat for too long, and wanted nothing more than to be born in troubled times? At that time, the masters of the cultivation world didn't know why the immortals of the upper realm were fighting each other. They only knew that they were fighting for something. Even the immortals of the upper realm were willing to risk their lives to fight for it. Naturally, it attracted more and more masters of the cultivation world to participate in it. As a result, the cultivation world was in a mess. Until one day, another person came down from the upper realm. This person rode on the number 1 divine beast of the celestial realm. As long as there was a big fight in the mortal world, he would appear and join in the fun. The celestials who came down from the lower realm would run away as soon as they saw him. They were extremely afraid of him, and those celestials called him the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. The Myriad Swords Demon Monarch? Yu Qianqiu suddenly frowned and muttered. Master, I think I heard Wu Huagan, the son of the Wu clan's current master, mention this person before. He said that he could control tens of thousands of flying swords to fight against the enemy. I didn't expect that he was also an immortal of the upper realm. Yes, this person could indeed control tens of thousands of flying swords to fight against the enemy. At that time, none of the immortals were a match for him. They could only run away when they encountered him. Bai Changchun said with admiration. Because the immortals only knew how to run away, he felt very bored, so he set up a heaven and earth formation and trapped all the immortals in it. He wandered around the mortal world, and whenever he felt bored, he would run into the heaven and earth formation and find someone to fight with. One time, the immortals who were trapped in the formation finally stopped hiding. They used a trick and joined forces to attack him. Finally, he was seriously injured. When he returned to the outside world to recuperate, he saw that the mortal world was not peaceful, so he became kind. When he had free time, he drove most of the demons and ghosts in the world together, which became the demons and ghosts domain of today. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that there was such a super awesome person who would beat up immortals to relieve his boredom. He asked in shock, Master, you mean that the Eastern Holy Land and the demons and ghosts domain were created by him? Yes. Bai Changchun nodded, then suddenly shook his head and said, just when he was seriously injured, 2 people came down from the upper realm, but they were his sworn enemies. After a fierce battle, the demon monarch of 10,000 swords finally died. At that point, the chaotic era of ancient times came to an end, and the world began to be dominated by humans. Died. Yu Qianqiu suddenly realized something. He let out a breath and said, Master, what did those immortals want to steal? Who got it in the end? The star pearl. Bai Changchun sighed and said, It said that it's a pearl formed by the power of the stars in the universe. It only appears once every 100 million years. Whoever can fuse with it can become a god. A god is an existence that surpasses the immortals of the upper realm. They are unrestrained, immortal, and live forever. As for who got the star pearl in the end, no one knows. TSK. No wonder even the immortals wanted to steal it. So there's such a good treasure. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, if only I could get it. There was an old saying that went, you don't know how lucky you are when you are blessed. It was probably referring to people like him. It's time to let your imagination run wild. But he didn't think about the golden pearl that made him who he was today from immortal. That's right, Master. Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked. Didn't they say that the demon monarch of 10,000 swords came down to the mortal world with him? What kind of divine beast is it? Where did that divine beast go? It's a dragon. It's said to be a red dragon. As for where it went, no one knows. It probably died at the hands of the demon monarch of 10,000 swords' two sworn enemies. Bai Changchun sighed. Dragon? A red dragon? CK your grandma. It can't be that coincidental, can it? Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and his eyes widened. The scene he saw under Twilight Valley's green fire appeared in his mind. The scene that scared him so much that he had to crawl and run for his life seemed to be that of a red dragon. And it even talked to him passionately. Chapter 313. Just as he was considering whether to tell his master about the dragon with the aura of a bastard, Bai Changchun said, Yu Qianqiu, if I pass on the position of torture master to you one day, will you accept it? Yu Qianqiu was stunned and immediately forgot about the dragon. He thought to himself, I'll find a chance to figure it out first. He rubbed his hands with a smile and said modestly, Master, you must be joking. With my current cultivation, how can I take over the demon ghost region? Yes. With the mysterious skill you practice, it shouldn't be a problem if you have the cultivation of the tribulation passing stage. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time to wait. It seems that I'll have to ask Nongzhu to help you for a while. Bai Changchun sighed. Rest in peace, He Li. Your unfinished business will be completed by me. Yu Qianqiu prayed silently in his heart and asked, Master, who is Mr. Nongzhu? Why do you think so highly of him? Bai Changchun smiled and said, He is a cultivator at the middle stage of deification. He lives in the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea, and occasionally goes to the secular world to play. The previous torturer of the demon region had originally chosen him to take over, and he reluctantly agreed. However, because he was carefree and lazy by nature, and because I appeared at the right time, he tricked me into coming to the demon region. Due to fate, I became the torturer of the demon region. Purple bamboo forest in the South Sea? Mr. Nongzhu is Guanyin Bodhisattva? Yu Qianqiu was confused and asked, Master, is Mr. Nongzhu a man or a woman? Of course he's a man, but he has a female disciple. If there's a chance, I'll ask you to go to the South Sea to visit him. After all, you still need his support after I leave. Bai Changchun was stunned and asked, Why do you ask? Oh, nothing, just asking. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, Master, do you really have to go to the Holy East Land? I've heard from He Li that it's a very dangerous place. Very few people can come out after going in. Moreover, even if they go there, they might not be able to find a way to ascend to the immortal realm. I've heard Master talk about the ancient times. I'm sure that the immortal realm isn't comfortable either. Why go there to suffer? How can it be as free and unfettered as staying in the human world? Bai Changchun shook his head and said with a smile, I didn't go to the Eastern Holy Land to seek the method to ascend to the world of immortals. My life is nearing its end, so what I seek is to break through to the late deity transformation stage and attain immortality. Besides, as he said this, a strange look suddenly flashed in his eyes. Since immortals can live forever, I'm sure there are still a large number of immortals trapped in the Eastern Holy Land. Even if I can't obtain immortality, I still want to fight a great battle to my heart's content. It has been my wish for many years to be able to suffer a great defeat in my lifetime. Yu Qianqiu, ever since I reached the final stage of tribulation passing, I have never been defeated. It has been more than 2,000 years. You won't understand how I feel. Understood. How could I not understand? Isn't it just Dugaqiubai? You make it sound so coquettish. You're obviously looking for excitement because your spirit is empty, yet you still have so many excuses. How great would it be if you had the time to enjoy all the beauties in the world? No one would be able to win you over. Looks like I'll have to find that Mr. Nongzhu and spar with him when I have time. He's one of my people. Yu Qianqiu muttered in his heart. He frowned and said, Although Master's cultivation is invincible in the mortal world, To challenge an immortal, this. Master, an immortal's cultivation must be extraordinary. What he meant was to advise his master to think twice before acting. How could an immortal be so easily bullied? Originally, I also thought that an immortal was very great. Bai Changchun suddenly snorted coldly and stood up. A hint of arrogance appeared on his aged face as he said, 200 years ago, I went to the periphery of the East Holy Land to investigate, and coincidentally met an immortal who lived in the mortal world. After knowing his identity, I treated him with great respect and humbly asked him some questions. However, he was arrogant. In a fit of anger, I fought with him. In less than half a day, he died under my sword. An immortal is nothing more than this. He couldn't satisfy me to my heart's content. Because of this, I became even more determined to enter the East Holy Land. You're awesome. Even an immortal was killed by you. Pretend I didn't say anything earlier. Yu Qianqiu looked at him in shock and was completely speechless. It seemed that this master's confidence was extremely inflated. Yu Qianqiu, now you should understand what kind of heavy responsibility you have to shoulder. Bai Changchun strolled to the door and said as he looked at the distant horizon. Yu Qianqiu stood up and followed him. He smiled bitterly and said, Master wants me to continue guarding the demon ghost region. He didn't know why, but now he was a little dispirited and uninterested in the matter that he originally yearned for. Bai Changchun nodded and said, Not only that, but forget it, there are some things that you don't need to know for now. When I leave, I will naturally tell you. Now, I need you to do two things. Master, please instruct me. Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. Bai Changchun said without turning his head, First, go to the demon ghost region and find a reliable person to help you plant the deficient flame profound fruit. You can choose anyone in the demon ghost region. You shouldn't spend your time on this. Second, after you finish the first thing, go to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest and find Nongju. When you arrive, she will understand what I mean. She will arrange some things for you to do. Take this opportunity, the two of you can get to know each other. This disciple understands. Yu Qianqiu agreed and thought. The first thing is easy. Tomorrow, the Demon King and the Ghost King will gather together. I can choose one at random. Presumably, as long as I say it, there will be a lot of people who want to come. Doing the second thing will give me a chance to go back and have a look. It has been a month. I don't know what the situation outside is now. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard Bai Changchun snorting coldly. He looked up and followed his gaze. He didn't know what was happening in the distance. The clouds in the sky were actually circling, and he could faintly see the flashing thunder and lightning. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Isn't that where Miss Mu is? He couldn't help asking, Master, what's going on there? A ghost cultivator has broken through to the final stage of the Ghost King, and is crossing the tribulation. Bai Changchun said, suddenly looked back at him and asked, In the demon domain, the real Demon King and the Ghost King are gathering in that place. Did you do it? Yu Qianqiu nodded awkwardly and said, After the Demon Kings and the Ghost King know that I have become your disciple, they all want to meet me. I can't bear to refuse their kindness, so I designated a meeting place for them and plan to meet them tomorrow. Master, if you think it's inappropriate, I will ask them to leave now. You don't need to ask me for this kind of thing. You have the right to do it yourself. After saying this, Bai Changchun returned to his original position and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and rested calmly. Yu Qianqiu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The old man had delegated the power to him. As long as he didn't act recklessly, he should be fine. Speaking of which, Yu Ji received the news that Yu Qianqiu was going to gather all the Demon Kings and the Ghost King in the demon domain. She was overjoyed. This time, she must remind Yu Qianqiu of what he had promised her. She was really afraid that he would forget it, so she rushed over a day earlier. As soon as she arrived at Miss Mu's stronghold, she found that there were people who had arrived earlier than her. Some even arrived nearly 10 days earlier. Those who came were guests. As the owner of this place, and in addition to the fact that it was Yu Qianqiu who had ordered her to come, Miss Mu naturally warmly welcomed the Ghost King and the Demon King. As soon as Yu Ji sat down in the stronghold, Her expression suddenly changed. She secretly cursed, "This is bad." Her cultivation level was originally at the mid-stage of the Ghost King, but she had broken through to the late stage of the Ghost King some time ago. Based on her calculations, she would be undergoing the heavenly tribulation within a year. Who knew that the heavenly tribulation would suddenly come today? The Demon Kings and the Ghost King were all experienced people, so they naturally understood what was going on. Miss Mu quickly led Yuji to an open space far away from the stronghold. Although she was afraid that the stronghold would be affected, she was also helping Yuji. This was all she could do to help Yuji. If anyone interfered, Yuji would have to endure an even more powerful heavenly tribulation. At this moment, a group of Demon Kings and Ghost Kings were standing in the distance watching. The dark clouds in the sky were as black as ink, and ferocious bolts of lightning flashed across them. As more and more lightning bolts appeared, the wind howled, and with a loud boom, a strong light finally converged and fiercely struck down. Yuji, who was on the ground, was like a duckweed in the wind, struggling to resist the lightning bolts that were constantly striking down. Chapter 3:14. 300 Demon Kings and 300 Ghost King had gathered in the mountain stronghold. It was bustling with activity. Large bowls of wine and large pieces of meat were served. Everyone was like an overlord. The men sat around the table with wine cups in their hands, looking very heroic. The women chatted and laughed in groups of 2 or 3. Men and women had different ways of making friends. Bai Changchun had never gathered all the demons and ghosts together. Not all the Demon Kings and Ghost King knew each other. Most of them had only heard of each other, but never seen each other. It could be said that this was the first time such a scene had happened in the history of the demon region. The one who had done this was naturally Yu Qianqiu. At this moment, the Demon Kings and Ghost King had lost their usual dignity and reservation in front of their subordinates. Everyone had the same status, so there was nothing to be pretentious about. Yu Qianqiu was the most discussed person among the crowd. Lady Mu had mobilized a large number of subordinates to serve the Demon Kings and Ghost King. She herself was busy, but she was busy and happy at the same time. Many people were looking at her with envy. They were envious that she had gained Yu Qianqiu's trust. They thought to themselves, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first. Everyone thought that gaining Yu Qianqiu's trust might be a life-saving talisman at a critical moment. The busy Lady Mu walked through the mountain stronghold with a smile on her face. She nodded at the crowd from time to time. Big Sister Mu. A slender hand tugged at Miss Mu. It was a slender and voluptuous woman. Her hair was tied up in a bun, her eyebrows were like willow leaves, her eyes were bright, and her face was exquisite. Her body was wrapped in a seductive black veil that exuded a feminine charm. She was definitely the best of the best. Lady Mu stopped and turned around. She smiled and said, "Sister Yu, what's the matter?" As she spoke, the surrounding women moved closer with Lady Mu in the center. The gorgeous woman called Sister Yu looked around with her watery eyes. She smiled sweetly and said, "Sister Mu, we are really envious that you have gained Sir's favor. I don't know what Mr. Yu likes. I hope Elder Sister Mu can tell us so that we can be prepared." The group of women nodded in agreement. The group of men also temporarily stopped shouting and pricked up their ears. Lady Mu glanced at the crowd, shook her head, and said with a smile, "Sister Yu, what are you talking about? I've only met Mr. twice. How would I know what he likes?" "Huh." The beautiful woman seemed to have heard a funny joke. She laughed until her body trembled. "Sister, don't try to trick me. I've heard that you've already accompanied Mr. while naked twice. Otherwise, why would Mr. be so fond of you and gather us at your stronghold? So that was how it was." All of a sudden, there was an uproar. They all thought that Lady Mu had done it with Yu Qianqiu, so they looked at Lady Mu with much more respect. But Lady Mu's eyes turned cold. She had stripped naked and accompanied Yu Qianqiu to take a bath twice. This matter was only known by a few people within her circle. Even outsiders knew about it. Someone must have leaked it. Thinking of Yu Qianqiu's decisiveness in killing and the heart-palpitating blue flame, Lady Mu's heart quivered. Who leaked it? This matter must be investigated. Yu Fengjiao. Someone in the crowd shouted. Yu Yan came over and said coldly with a gloomy face. How dare you say such baseless words? Aren't you afraid that Mr. Yu will be angry if he finds out? She had seen Yu Qianqiu kill without batting an eye. Oh, I was wondering who it was. It turned out to be Yu Yan. Yu Fengjiao said with a look of sudden realization. Yes. This place is controlled by 2 women. I heard that Mr. is a young man. No wonder he likes this place. Alas! The illicit relationship between a human, a demon, and a ghost must have a different feeling. Yu Fengjiao, I'm really envious. As she spoke, her hands swayed seductively, intentionally or unintentionally passing over her ample breasts and perky buttocks. She twisted her snake-like soft waist and glanced provocatively at Lady Mu's and Yoyan's breasts with disdain. She looked as if she was the master of 2 men. The group of men looked at each other in shock. They all thought that this woman was too bold. She dared to say such words. Was she not afraid of death? Is this the so-called first beauty of our demon domain, Sister Yu Fengjiao? The pale Yu Ji came over and looked Yu Fengjiao up and down. Lady Mu's face was as cold as frost. She wanted to lose her temper, but it was not convenient. After all, she had gathered everyone on behalf of Yu Qianqiu. As soon as she saw Yu Ji, she immediately came over to help her up and said, Madam, why did you come out? You have just crossed the tribulation and are weak. You should have a good rest. Not only Lady Mu, but also the other Ghost King and Demon King, as well as the arrogant Yu Fengjiao, all respectfully greeted her. Madam. It should be known that Meng Yan was quite senior in the demon domain. He had been conferred the title of Ghost King by the former torture envoy, and his seniority was even higher than by Changchun's. The most important thing was that Meng Yan had a power that was different from others. He had a group of hundreds of thousands of loyal soldiers who would follow him through life and death. After cultivating in the demon domain for thousands of years, there were definitely many masters among them. There were countless cultivators at the late stage of the Ghost King, more than anywhere else. This was also the reason why after Bai Changchun killed Meng Yan, he wanted to help Yu Ji, who was only at the middle stage of the Ghost King, ascend the throne. If it were someone else, it would be difficult for any cultivator at the late stage of the Ghost King to control the hundreds of thousands of ghost soldiers. When Meng Yan was alive, they listened to either the general or the madam. Now that the general was dead, they naturally listened to the madam. In the demon domain, the torture envoy did not allow outsiders to make trouble here at will, nor did he allow the people inside to go out at will. However, he usually turned a blind eye to the internal disputes in the demon domain. It didn't matter how many people died, and they could fight at will. However, they were allowed to kill each other, but they were not allowed to occupy territory. Even if they won, they had to go back to their respective places. In short, the territory was made of iron, but the people were alive. Anyway, there were many demon kings at the late stage of the tribulation passing in the demon domain. Once they died, they could immediately confer a new one. So it didn't matter if they continued to fight. It could be said that, whether it was a group fight or a one-on-one fight, no one in the entire demon domain was a match for Meng Yan's group. Even though Meng Yan was dead, that terrifying power had a new master, and that was this pale-faced woman. From this, it could be seen how important Yu Ji was. Yu Fengjiao dared to be arrogant in front of Miss Mu, but she had to behave herself in front of Yu Ji. Otherwise, if Yu Ji gave the order, Yu Fengjiao would definitely have no way to escape, and the army could sweep her territory clean in a few days. Yu Ji's eyes slowly swept across the crowd. Although she was smiling, she felt a little sad in her heart. Facing the heroes in the demon domain, the man who had protected her for thousands of years was really gone. She had to bear all the things alone. She was a little tired and really wanted to leave this sad place as soon as possible. As long as she was still in the demon domain, she would always be marked by Ghost General Meng Yan, which could be seen from the way everyone called her Madam. She restrained her emotions and said to Miss Mu with a smile, "I don't know when Mr. Yu will arrive. If he comes and I can't welcome him in time, wouldn't it be a sin? I don't have the mood to rest." "Madam can rest in peace. I have sent people to guard the 1,000-mile lake. Once Sir arrives, someone will immediately report to you, Miss Mu said as she supported her. Yu Ji shook her head and looked at Yu Fengjiao. She smiled meaningfully and said, Sister Yu is indeed worthy of being called the #1 beauty in the demon region. Now that I've seen you today, you do live up to your reputation. Yu Fengjiao hurriedly bowed. I dare not. Madame's beauty is really peerless. I have admired you for a long time. She glanced at Miss Mu and Yu Yan and sneered, but I am confident that my beauty is better than some people. If it weren't for the fact that this place is close to the 1,000-mile lake, and some people have taken the initiative, Sir would not have chosen this place to gather everyone. It just so happens that some people are so arrogant. Madam, don't you think it's annoying? Yu Ji was a smart woman and immediately understood the meaning of Yu Fengjiao's words. She smiled and did not say anything. The other men shook their heads. It was true that 3 women were like a drama. This woman was crazy. She did not know where and when to be jealous. Yu Yan, who was on the side, shouted on the spot. Yu Fengjiao. What do you mean by that? Yu Fengjiao raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to mock him, a silhouette flashed by and bowed to Lady Mu. Lady Mu, Mr. Yu has left the 1,000-miles lake and is flying towards us. Hearing this, the atmosphere immediately became solemn. The women stopped making a fuss, and everyone stopped watching. They immediately rushed out of the entrance of the stronghold and lined up to welcome him. Chapter 315. Ha! How lively! From afar, Yu Qianqiu saw a large group of people at the entrance of the stronghold. As soon as his sword landed, a group of people knelt on the ground and said in unison, Greetings, mister. Hee, no need to be so courteous. Get up. Yu Qianqiu laughed and raised his hand. Looking around, there were people wearing all kinds of clothes and colors. Especially their hair. It was a complete mess. No wonder they were demons and ghosts. The demons and ghosts were also secretly sizing him up. Seeing his smiling face, they all felt that he should not be difficult to get along with. Lady Mu, who had stood up, walked over and raised her hand to welcome him. Mister, please come in. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded at the crowd, then walked in. If it was in the past, he might have been a little timid to see so many people who were similar to the final stage of the god's tribulation. But now his mentality was very different. Especially after listening to Bai Changchun's amazing speech these 2 days, and seeing this group of demon kings and ghost king, he really felt that they were nothing. The eyes of the demons and ghosts revolved around him and moved with him. Yu Fengjiao, who was among them, had a fiery look in her eyes. She wanted to go over and talk to them, but due to her identity, she was more or less afraid and did not dare to act rashly. Seeing Lady Mu and Yu Qianqiu smiling at each other, an unconcealable jealousy appeared in her eyes, and she gnashed her teeth in anger. When Yu Ji saw that Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept past her without even stopping for a moment, her face immediately became even paler. She felt miserable in her heart. Yu Qianqiu's current status was unreachable. How could he still be that young man who was on the verge of death back then? As expected, he had forgotten about her. When she thought of her dead husband, she felt that it was not worth it. She did not know that Yu Qianqiu's eyes were a little dazzled by these heroes of different colors. He was not in the mood to distinguish who was who. Otherwise, the 9th nether cave under her Ghost King's hall would be enough to attract him. Madame Mu, who was leading the way, suddenly realized that Yu Qianqiu had stopped after a few steps. She couldn't help but ask, Mister, is there something wrong? The group of demon ghosts following him also stopped. Yu Qianqiu shook his head, then looked around and said, I heard from Master yesterday that there's a ghost cultivator here who has broken through to the Ghost King final phase, and is undergoing his tribulation. Who is it? The demonic ghosts naturally knew who the master he was referring to was. They immediately felt deep veneration, and their demeanor became much more respectful. It seemed like they were all afraid of Bai Changchun. Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved his hand. Don't mind me, I was just asking. As he said that, he paused. Yuji walked out from the crowd and bowed. Mister, it was I who was undergoing my tribulation yesterday. F***ck. This woman's cultivation was already at the Ghost King final phase. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and suddenly said in a surprised tone, Sister-in-law, why are you here? How could I trouble sister-in-law to come and welcome me? Dispense with the formalities, dispense with the formalities. As he said that, he reached out to support Yuji. As their skin touched, he thought to himself, how smooth. The demonic ghosts looked at each other in confusion. They did not know when Yuji had become acquainted with Yu Qianqiu. Meanwhile, Yuji's body trembled. This sister-in-law was worth a lot. She bit her lips and said softly, I don't dare. Sister-in-law, please accept my condolences. This is all my fault. If it wasn't for my insistence, Brother Meng would not have. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu shook his head in regret. He held Yuji's arm tightly and patted it from time to time as if he was caressing it. His tone suddenly turned serious. Sister-in-law, don't worry. Although Brother Meng is no longer here, I'm still here. Sister-in-law, please take care. His words carried extra weight in the demonic ghost's ears. Yu Qianqiu's words clearly meant that he was protecting Yuji. Hence, they looked at Yuji with envy. Some of them suddenly realized that before Meng Yan died, he went to the 1,000-mile lake and saw Yu Qianqiu on a flying instrument. However, Yuji herself felt that there was something fishy. Yu Qianqiu's patting and caressing action immediately made her feel that there was a deeper meaning in his words. Her imagination ran wild. Brother Meng is no longer here, but I'm still here. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yuji's evasive eyes with pity. He thought to himself, I don't mean anything else. Don't think too much. He looked around and asked, Madame Meng's body is a little weak. Who can give her a hand? His question was a little redundant. No matter how weak Yuji was, she could still kill a tiger, let alone walk. He was just putting on an act and finding an excuse to let go. However, someone was willing to be attentive and volunteered to help. Yu Fengjiao was afraid that someone would snatch her away. She teleported over and bowed with a flirtatious look. Yu Fengjiao greets Mr. I'll help madam. As she said that, she took the initiative and threw a few flirtatious glances at a certain someone. Yuji's heart was pounding when she called him Mr. and Madam. Her imagination ran wild again. This person was too smart. She could always understand things that others couldn't. There was no other way. Yu Qianqiu was quite sensitive to flirting with beautiful women. He accepted all of them without missing a beat. His eyes lit up. He looked around and laughed. I didn't expect there to be so many beautiful women in our demon region. All the demons and ghosts immediately laughed along. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt refreshed. No wonder people said that a man couldn't be powerless for a day. Even the demons and ghosts knew how to flatter him. This feeling was not bad. He was also interested. He turned around and said, Yu Fengjiao? Is it that beauty of the world? You? Yes. Yu Fengjiao answered in a sweet voice. Her flirtatious eyes were like water, almost dripping out. Haha. Not bad. You are indeed a beauty. Yu Qianqiu laughed. Yu Fengjiao put on a shy expression and replied in a shameless tone. Thank you for your compliment, mister. This little slut is quite interesting. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but take a few more glances at her curvaceous body. Then he laughed heartily and waved his hand. He strode into the fort. A group of demon kings and the ghost king followed him. Their imposing manner made a certain someone feel proud of himself. A fancy seat had been set up on the steps outside the hall. Yu Qianqiu sat on the high seat without any reservations. He looked down at the demon kings and the ghost king, who had taken their respective seats. A sense of pride welled up in his chest. Lady Mu, who was standing beside him, smiled and said, Mister, the demon kings and the ghost king, who are in charge of the various territories, have gathered quite a number of spiritual herbs according to your instructions. They have been stored in the storeroom. Oh. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Have you gathered all the spiritual herbs listed on the Jade Archive? Lady Mu smiled bitterly and shook her head. No. Mister, you may not know this, but out of the thousands of spiritual herbs listed on the Jade Archive, we haven't managed to gather a single stalk of the top grade 9 scented spiritual herb. As for the few dozen top-grade spiritual herbs, they are too rare. We've only managed to gather a few of them. The rest are more or less complete. You're saying how many top-grade spiritual herbs have you gathered? Let's go. Quick, bring me to them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't sit still any longer. He stood up abruptly. It should be known that the top-grade spiritual herbs were about the same level as the 7-star blood orchid. As for the highest quality ones, they were even more difficult to find. They were all about the same grade as the Adumbra flower. These kinds of highest quality items were all things that could only be found by chance, not sought. He had originally intended to give it a try and let everyone try it out. However, he was already very surprised to be able to gather some top-grade spiritual herbs. Chapter 316. On the steps of the hall, Yu Qianqiu and Lady Mu walked away together. The demonic ghosts below the stage heard them clearly. When they saw that the spiritual herbs could make Yu Qianqiu lose his composure, their expressions turned solemn. Many of them had already taken out their duplicated jade archives and injected their divine senses into them to check on the spiritual herbs that were ranked at the top. All of them silently made up their minds. The storeroom was in a cave at the back of the mountain. Lady Mu led him to a single room. As soon as Yu Qianqiu walked in, his eyes lit up. On the long stone platform, there were strands of spiritual herbs of all shapes and sizes. Each of them had their own positions. He walked along the stone platform step by step, nodding his head with a smile on his face. He finally saw many spiritual herbs that he had never seen before. He used his divine sense to contact Chu Ping, in Utopia, and told her to prepare to receive the spiritual herbs. As he walked past and looked at the spiritual herbs on the stone platform, he swept them in. "Mister, these 4 are the top-grade spiritual herbs," Lady Mu said as she pointed to a single short stone platform in the middle. The 4 different spiritual herbs immediately attracted Yu Qianqiu's attention. He rubbed his hands excitedly and took a few steps forward. 7-star blood orchid? The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face froze. He picked up the rather old blood-red orchid, examined it carefully, and threw it into his storage pouch. He was all too familiar with the 7-star blood orchid, as he had planted a large number of them in Utopia. "Mister, is this called the 7-star blood orchid? What's its use?" Lady Mu asked curiously. "Nothing much. It's exactly what I need to concoct pills." Yu Qianqiu casually took it with him. When he gave her the jade archive back then, he had only marked out the spiritual plants and the like. As for what they were called or what they were used for, he hadn't copied them at all. He naturally had a plan in mind as to why he did this. Since Lady Mu could become the overlord of a region, she was not stupid. Seeing that he was unwilling to talk about it in detail, she did not ask further. Then he picked up another stalk of spirit grass with a heavy expression. It was a Ganoderma with 7 different colors. Rainbow Ganoderma. Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself in disappointment. It was recorded in the Jade Archive that if the 7-colored Ganoderma was combined with several other spiritual herbs to refine into a pill and consumed, it would be able to smoothly break through the bottlenecks of any stage of cultivation from the tribulation passing stage to the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. It was a treasure in the cultivation world for cultivation advancement. If a cultivator's cultivation base was stuck at the peak of the nascent soul late stage, a pill refined from the rainbow Lingji mushroom would almost certainly help him break through to the tribulation transcendent stage. Although the item was good, it reminded Yu Qianqiu of his sad past. It was precisely because how Sansi had unintentionally picked up this item that the Deluo sect had tried to kill him. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened at the thought of how the Deluo sect had yet to avenge his master's death. "Mister, what's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Lady Mu asked fearfully. This 7-colored Ganoderma had been picked by none other than one of her subordinates. Now that she saw Yu Qianqiu's expression, he was obviously very unhappy. How could she not be afraid? "It's nothing." Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses and took a deep breath. Holding the 7-colored Ganoderma in his hand, he smiled bitterly and said, "When I first entered the cultivation world, I became the disciple of a master. It was because of this item that my master lost his life. Now that I think about it, I feel a little sad." As he spoke, he stuffed the Ganoderma into his storage pouch. Lady Mu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. She could finally put her heart at ease. When she looked at Yu Qianqiu again, she saw that he was staring at the remaining 2 spiritual herbs with his mouth wide open. His eyes were slowly widening, and he had a look of disbelief on his face. He stood rooted to the spot, not moving an inch. The 2 spiritual herbs were about half the height of a person. Their leaves were green like jade and shaped like a baby's palm. The rest of their bodies were as transparent as crystal, and the meridians inside could be seen clearly. They looked like bamboo, but they were actually growing in segments. Every segment was the length of a finger, and there was a crystal ball-like segment. The 2 spiritual herbs looked strange, but they were almost identical. The only difference was that one could clearly see the meridians inside, one red and one purple. "What's wrong now?" Lady Mu looked at him suspiciously. The living beings in the demon realm had almost zero ability to distinguish and use spirit herbs. However, it was also because of this that some rare spirit herbs were preserved. She didn't understand, so naturally, she found it strange. Yu Qianqiu took out the jade archive containing the pill formula. After imbuing it with his divine sense, he put it away and suddenly grabbed the 2 stalks of spirit herbs in each of his hands. He sniffed the one on the right, then the one on the left. He nodded slightly and muttered, "The fragrance doesn't disperse, one strong and one weak. There's no mistaking it, there's no mistaking it. It's actually the seal of truth and falsehood. Damn it, I'm rich. Haha." The true and false sealess break was recorded in the pill recipe jade archive. This item was actually a pair of spirit herbs that grew together with a male and a female. The male herb was known as the false sealess break, while the female herb was known as the true sealess break. Wherever a male herb grew, the female herb would be found, and vice versa. Combined with a few other spirit herbs, it could be refined into a true and false limit-breaking pill. The male herb would produce a false limit-breaking pill, and the female herb would produce a true limit-breaking pill. But when the male and female herbs were combined, there was no distinction between the real and the fake. The spirit pill was called the limit-breaking pill. Since it was called the limit-breaking pill, it naturally had its miraculous effects. Normally, when a cultivator consumed a spirit pill, as long as they had enough spirit stones, the spiritual energy they absorbed within 2 hours of the pill's medicinal effects dissipating could be quickly refined into true origin with the help of the miraculous medicinal effects of the limit-breaking pill. Think about it. If there were enough limit-breaking pills and spirit stones, wouldn't it be possible to increase one's cultivation without any restrictions? Of course, although the limit-breaking pill was miraculous, it wasn't that exaggerated. If it really was that exaggerated, then Yu Qianqiu could turn his subordinates into gods. Although spirit pills were called limit-breaking pills, the great Tao of the heavens and earth still had a strong binding force. First of all, Yu Qianqiu could solve the problem of having a large amount of spirit stones and limit-breaking pills. As for the bottlenecks in cultivation, such as breaking through from the foundational stage to the core formation stage, he could also solve them. Especially now that he had the Rainbow Lingji, which could help people break through bottlenecks in cultivation, in his hands. However, once one's cultivation reached the Tribulation Transcendence stage, where one would have to endure the Tribulation Transcendence stage, this kind of spirit pill would lose its effect. This kind of mysterious thing between heaven and earth was difficult to explain. In other words, it didn't matter if it was the limit-breaking pill, the real limit-breaking pill, or the fake limit-breaking pill. All of them could help people increase their cultivation quickly. However, when one reached the tribulation passing stage, they would be useless. However, since there were 3 types of limit-breaking pills, each of them had their own advantages. The real limit-breaking pill could help people increase their cultivation level. However, after reaching the tribulation passing stage, one could only reach the end of the tribulation passing stage. It would be difficult to progress any further. This was because this type of Dan had side effects. The side effects of taking too many Dan. Just like what Bai Changchun said, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. The limit-breaking pill was, in fact, an insurmountable restriction was set at the end. The fake limit-breaking pill could also help people increase their cultivation level to the tribulation passing stage, but it was at the cost of one's life. Once one reached the tribulation passing stage, whoever took it would die. There was also an insurmountable restriction. Bai Chongqun often said that if the heavens had feelings, he was indeed an expert who cultivated the Tao. His words had revealed the secrets of the heavens. There was no difference between the real and the fake limit-breaking pill, but the restrictions of the tribulation passing stage were still there. Although there were no restrictions that made people feel pain, the heavens would not let them be so carefree. As the saying went, there was always a loss. The price of taking a spiritual pill was that one would not be able to move for a month, and their entire body would be stiff. Only after the side effects were gone would their bodies be able to move freely. By the time they could move, it would already be a month later. If it was for the sake of increasing their cultivation level, why wouldn't they be afraid? They could come every month to stiffen their bodies. Yu Qianqiu was often worried about the cultivation levels of his subordinates in Utopia. When he brought them out to fight, they would have to scheme and scheme. Although there were many of them, they could only do some sneaky things. This was too displeasing, but there was nothing they could do. If they met someone powerful, they would not be able to win. Just as he was dozing off, someone sent him a pillow. How could he not be happy? If the troops under him were all experts at the tribulation passing stage, and were well trained, what would it mean to bring them out to fight? Just thinking about it made him extremely excited. Chapter 317. In Utopia, Bai Suzhen was focused on breaking the restrictions on the Green Destiny Sword. She had entrusted the daily management of Ethereal Palace to Chu Ping'er. Chu Ping'er, who had completely resolved the knot in her heart, shouldered the heavy responsibility and stopped overthinking. Now that she had something to do, coupled with the nourishment of love and her husband, she, who was already a beauty, shone with an astonishing charm. At this moment, she was acting like a smart and capable woman as she instructed everyone to carefully handle the spiritual herbs that Yu Qianqiu had brought over. Her man was working hard outside, so she had to look after the house for him. He might have risked his life to obtain these spiritual herbs. As the beautiful Chu Ping'er was letting her imagination run wild, Yu Qianqiu's voice rang in her ears again. Ping'er, I have 2 more spiritual herbs here. You must look after them carefully and try to breed them as soon as possible. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Ping'er realized that there were 2 more strange-looking spiritual herbs in front of her. She could see them, but not see anyone. She instinctively looked around. Yu Qianqiu's teasing voice rang out again. Stop looking around. Ask. My Ping'er is getting prettier and prettier. Be good and wait. It won't be long before your hubby comes back to serve you. As his voice faded away, Chu Ping'er's cheeks flushed red. She secretly snorted. She knew very well what this bad man meant by serve me. After a while, he carefully put away the 2 spirit herbs that Yu Qianqiu had given him. After flirting with Chu Ping'er behind his back, Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood. He nodded at Miss Mu and said, You did well this time. You flatter me, mister. Miss Mu smiled knowingly. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, Come, let's go take a look. The 2 of them returned to the steps of the hall. The whispering crowd immediately quietened down. Yu Qianqiu returned to his high seat in the middle of the room, and scrutinized the demonic ghosts below him. Seeing that many of them were still holding on to jade archives, he suddenly realized something. Turning his head, he shouted, Lady Mu, which demon king and ghost king sent those 4 top-notch spiritual herbs? All of a sudden, there was silence below, and everyone pricked up their ears. Lady Mu smiled and looked at the crowd below. Suddenly 3 people's eyes lit up. They should be the ones who had picked the top-grade spiritual herbs. However, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand again and said, Forget it, Miss Mu, register the names of those 4 people. In the future, if anyone can find top-notch or supreme-grade spiritual herbs, write them down. I will thank them all at that time. Yes, sir. After Lady Mu finished speaking, she smiled apologetically at the 3 people below her. Suddenly, she noticed that many of them were signaling her with their eyes. She paused, then bowed slightly and whispered into Yu Qianqiu's ear. Mister, there are quite a few people who have brought you greeting gifts this time. Do you want them to bring them up now? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, leaned on his chair, and crossed his legs. He said, I appreciate everyone's kind intentions, but there's no need to trouble everyone. Why don't you send someone to collect them for me? Just remember to list the corresponding names on the list. I will understand when I see them. The people who had prepared greeting gifts were disappointed. There were many people here, and they had all planned to make themselves familiar with Yu Qianqiu. Who knew that this would be the result? How could they know what Yu Qianqiu was thinking? First of all, Yu Qianqiu thought that these people didn't even have enough spirit stones for cultivation. He reckoned that they wouldn't be able to bring out anything good. Second, he felt that it would be too troublesome to wait for them to bring out their gifts one by one. There were so many people here. So he dismissed them with a single sentence. Lady Mu glanced at the people below and bowed. I understand, sir. I will send someone to collect the gifts. There's one more thing. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, asking her to wait. He stood up and cupped his hands at the crowd. I came here on the orders of my master. There's a small job on Obedient Island that needs help. My master asked me to choose a suitable candidate to go to Obedient Island. I wonder if anyone is willing to go with me? As soon as he said this, the people below were so quiet that they could hear a pin drop. After they reacted, the demonic ghost's breathing quickened, and their eyes became fiery. Who wouldn't want to stay by Changchun's side? Wasn't Heli also a demonic cultivator? Didn't he also become Bai Changchun's disciple? The way he ran amok in demonic ghost domain was enviable. Although the ending wasn't good, he asked for it. Even if he couldn't be accepted as Bai Changchun's disciple, he would still be someone by his side. At that time, no one in demonic ghost domain would dare to not give him face. In demonic ghost domain, Bai Changchun was a godlike existence to everyone. To be able to stay by his side, not to mention the benefits, just the honor was unimaginable to outsiders. Now that Yu Qianqiu suddenly announced this news, all of them couldn't sit still. Since he was going to choose, it meant that everyone had a chance. This wasn't a dream, right? Lady Mu's hands grabbed the corners of her clothes uneasily. Her knuckles turned white as she let her imagination run wild. Yu Ji, who was below the stage, couldn't stop her heart. She bit her lips and stared at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Fengjiao, on the other hand, stuck out her full chest, wishing that she could attract Yu Qianqiu's gaze. These were the people who thought that they had a higher chance. Why aren't you saying anything? Yu Qianqiu raised a hand and said with a frown, How about this? Those who are willing to go, raise your hand. Swish. Not a single one of them held their hands up. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked at Yu Ji, who had her hand raised high. This woman also wanted to join in the fun? He looked up at the sky and gestured for everyone to put down their hands. He cleared his throat and said, Everyone, I forgot to tell you clearly. The sky above Shuntian Island is not covered by dark clouds all year round. During the day, the sun shines brightly. I'm afraid that ghost cultivators can't stay on the island. So this time, we will only choose one person from the demonic ghost cultivators. Of course, if anyone has the cultivation of Ghost Sage stage and can walk in broad daylight, you can also give it a try. Instantly, the 300 Ghost King became listless. Yu Ji's body trembled and her face became paler. Yu Fengjiao glanced at Yu Ji and her eyes lit up. Her charming eyes were full of confidence. In her eyes, she only saw Yu Ji, who Yu Qianqiu called sister-in-law, as her competitor. Now that Yu Ji and the 300 ghost cultivators had been eliminated, she believed that no one could be her opponent, including Lady Mu. Ever since she heard that Yu Qianqiu and Lady Mu were naked together, she thought that her chance had come. She was very confident in her beauty. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said with a smile, Don't think that coming to Shuntian Island is a good job. Once you're on the island, you can't leave without my master's permission. Don't blame me if you can't bear the loneliness. Loneliness? Everyone here had cultivated for over 1,000 years. Who would be afraid of loneliness? No one listened to his words. They were all fantasizing about the glory of being by Changchun's side. Yu Qianqiu knew the answer from their fanatical eyes. He shook his head and said, "It seems that everyone wants to go, but I can only bring one person with me. How about this? I'll go take a bath first. You guys discuss it. It's best if everyone can recommend one person." As he said this, he turned around and said to Miss Mu, "Get someone to collect the gift. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed your massage skills. Accompany me to take a bath." He did not hide his words from the rest of the demons and ghosts, so they heard him clearly. Yu Fengjiao's expression changed. Although Lady Mu didn't think that it was a big deal, she still blushed when she heard it in front of so many people. She bowed and said, "Yes." Then, she quickly arranged for someone to help Yu Qianqiu collect the greeting gifts. Just as the two of them were about to enter the hall, someone suddenly called out, "Mister, please wait." Yu Qianqiu looked back and saw the seductive Yu Fengjiao walking out from the crowd. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's the matter?" The woman seemed to have thrown caution to the wind. She bowed seductively and said, "Mister, you must be tired. This little demon's massage technique is not bad. I'm willing to go with you to relieve your fatigue. I hope Mister will allow it." As soon as she said this, Lady Mu frowned. The people below looked at each other. They didn't expect Yu Fengjiao to do this. There were many female demons among the demons, but none of them were as bold as her. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Lady Mu and said with a smile, "Lady Mu's company is enough. I don't dare to trouble the demon monarch." Just as he was about to turn around, he heard Yu Fengjiao call out, "Mister, please wait. Am I not clear enough?" Yu Qianqiu looked back and said in a cold tone. Yu Fengjiao was so scared that her heart skipped a beat. However, she still gritted her teeth and forced a smile on her face. She bowed and said, "I have a special treasure to give to Mister as a greeting gift. I hope Mister will accept it." "Special treasure?" Yu Qianqiu's expression softened. He turned around and said, "What kind of special treasure does the demon monarch have? Why don't you show it to me?" Once he heard that there was a good treasure for him, he immediately became very easy to talk to. The demon ghosts were also curious. They didn't know what kind of special treasure Yu Fengjiao had. Yu Fengjiao looked at everyone and said awkwardly, "Mister, it's really not convenient to show this greeting gift in front of everyone. Can you?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes brightened. Could it be that he really came across a good treasure on this trip? It seemed like he had to take a closer look at the demon ghost's gift list. He didn't want to miss out on anything good. He smiled and said, "If that's the case, the demon monarch can come with me. I want to see what kind of treasure it is, and see the demon monarch's massage technique." He laughed and turned around. "Thank you, mister." Yu Fengjiao bowed in high spirits and quickly walked up the stairs. Together with the silent Lady Mu, her slender waist and hips swayed in a graceful manner. Chapter 318. The demonic ghosts below the stage were speechless. After a long time, someone cursed. "Offering a treasure? I think it's offering her body. Yu Fengjiao, this bitch, is shameless. I'm sure she's up to no good. Maybe the opportunity to go to Shuntian Island will really be taken by her." Someone immediately sneered. "Since you know that she might go to Shuntian Island, how dare you scold her? Aren't you afraid that she will make things difficult for you?" The person who scolded her earlier was speechless. Thinking about it, it was true. Regardless of whether she was shameless or not, if she really went to Shuntian Island, it would be very easy for her to deal with him. Yuji turned a deaf ear to these words. Her heart was filled with desolation. She could only blame herself for being a ghost. Otherwise, she might have a chance. Meanwhile, a man and two women entered the hot spring cave at the back of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He rubbed his hands impatiently and said, "There's no one else here. Demon Monarch, if you have any greeting gifts, why don't you take them out?" Lady Mu also stared at Yu Fengjiao curiously. She didn't know what special treasures she had brought as a greeting gift. But what she saw next made Lady Mu completely stunned. Yu Fengjiao delicately lifted her hands and gently took off her clothes. In the blink of an eye, her curvaceous snow-white body was revealed. Yu Fengjiao shyly stood there without saying a word, allowing Yu Qianqiu to admire her. Yu Qianqiu admitted that her figure was very attractive, but to him the so-called special treasure was even more alluring. He looked carefully at the naked body in front of him, but he didn't seem to see what he wanted. He asked with a face full of doubt, "Demon Monarch, what do you mean? Where's the treasure you mentioned? Why don't I see it?" Hearing this, Lady Mu awkwardly turned her head away and held back her laughter. As a woman, she naturally understood Yu Fengjiao's intentions. But Mr. Yu still didn't understand, and was still looking for the treasure. Yu Fengjiao was stunned. She twisted her soft waist and forced a smile. "This little demon will give myself to Mr. as a greeting gift. I wonder if Mr. is satisfied? What do I want you for? Where's the treasure you were talking about?" Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and asked for the treasure. He really wasn't faking it. He really hadn't figured it out yet because he felt that with his current status, no one in the demon region would dare to play tricks on him. Yu Fengjiao was a little dumbfounded as she stood there naked. Her lips moved, but no words came out. In the end, Lady Mu couldn't hold back her laughter. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with admiration and said, Sister Yu means that she herself is that special treasure, and she is offering herself to you as a greeting gift." As soon as Yu Qianqiu heard it, he understood that there was really someone who dared to fool him. His face immediately darkened, and he glanced at the seductive body in front of him expressionlessly. Through the demon-revealing mirror on his chest, he saw that Yu Fengjiao's original form was actually a big black snake with a ferocious face. Its appearance was quite frightening, and it was impossible to associate it with the naked body in front of him. He couldn't help but say coldly, "So you yourself are that special treasure? It seems that I really misjudged you." After saying that, he turned around and took off his clothes, soaked in the hot spring pool, and closed his eyes to enjoy the comfortable massage from Lady Mu, who entered the water next. Lady Mu skillfully massaged Yu Qianqiu's body with her 10 fingers, and occasionally looked back at Yu Fengjiao, who was standing restlessly. The two women's eyes met, and immediately sparks flew. Yu Fengjiao didn't hesitate to think that Lady Mu's gaze was provocative. On the other hand, Lady Mu's body was definitely not as good as hers, so her confidence rose again. She gritted her teeth and actually entered the hot spring. She nervously touched her 10 fingers on Yu Qianqiu's body, and stiffly moved. "If you want to massage, then do it seriously. Don't spoil my fun." Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes, then closed them again and said. Yu Fengjiao thought that he didn't dislike it, so her coquettishness came out again. She often accidentally rubbed the most successful parts of her body, and in the end, the massage simply became friction, squeezing Lady Mu's working position. Lady Mu was calm, and simply moved aside. She went ashore, put on her clothes, and watched from the side. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. To be honest, every time he came to Lady Mu's place, he didn't have any improper thoughts. He came purely for Lady Mu's massage skills. Her skills were really good. The current scene reminded him of the massage scenes in his previous life. Massages were also divided into formal and informal ones. The informal ones inevitably had a bit of erotic allure. That kind of technique wasn't very good, and it was purely a side business of selling meat. For example, the formal massage for the blind was indeed enjoyable. After all, he relied on his skills to make a living, and he often went there. Now, the difference between Yu Fengjiao and Lady Mu's massage was the difference between formal and informal. If this continued, he would definitely be burned with lust. Yu Qianqiu pushed Yu Fengjiao away, and got up to let Lady Mu help him put on his clothes. In the past, he would enjoy a comfortable nap, but today he met a butcher, so how could he sleep? Yu Fengjiao, who was pushed away, didn't mind. She sensed that there was a slight change in Yu Qianqiu's body. She thought that her charm was still better than Lady Mu's, and that Yu Qianqiu was running away. Thus, she put on her clothes with some pride, and followed behind Yu Qianqiu, who was walking out. She asked, Is Mr. satisfied with this little demon's technique? Yu Qianqiu didn't express any opinion and didn't say much. If there's a chance, this little demon is willing to come to Obedient Island and serve Mr. for a long time. Yu Fengjiao said vaguely, expressing her feelings. Do the same thing in Obedient Island? Damn it. You're not afraid of death, but I am. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. I will consider it seriously. Thank you, Mr. Yu Fengjiao's true form was that of a snake. She followed Lady Mu's words and climbed up. As she spoke, she looked at Lady Mu, who was also a demon king, with some pride. Hearing this, Lady Mu's expression changed. She was also in the big environment of the demon ghost region, and couldn't help but desire to go to Obedient Island. However, she couldn't do it as openly as Yu Fengjiao. The outside was already in a mess. Everyone wanted to go to Obedient Island. Since Yu Qianqiu had asked everyone to recommend one person, they all recommended him. It was impossible for them to pee in the same pot. Thus the conflict arose, and they almost started fighting. When the three of them stood on the steps again, the demon kings quieted down, but none of them liked each other. Yu Fengjiao stood on the steps and didn't come down. She looked down confidently, and looked at the demon kings with disdain. Yu Qianqiu glanced at her, and didn't say anything. If you want to fight, wait until I'm gone, Yu Qianqiu coldly said. He looked around at the quiet crowd and said, I have always been a fair person. Have the people I asked you to recommend come out? If you have, come forward. The demon kings below looked at each other. After waiting for a long time, no one stepped forward. Yu Qianqiu was expressionless, but he sneered in his heart. He knew this would be the case. If not for the fact that he was a little embarrassed to accept their gifts, he wouldn't have talked about democracy with them. After a while he said, Since you haven't recommended anyone, I'll pick one randomly. You won't have any objections, right? No, we'll listen to Mr. Everyone agreed. In fact, even if they had objections, no one dared to say it. After all, not everyone was as arrogant and daring as Yu Fengjiao. In that case, I'll bring Lady Mu back to Obedient Island. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu asked. All the demon ghosts looked at Lady Mu enviously. Some of them thought that it was as they expected. Lady Mu was at a loss. She bowed in surprise and said, Thank you, mister. This sentence was said by Yu Fengjiao not long ago. In the blink of an eye, it had changed hands. Yu Fengjiao finally regained her senses. She lost her composure and said anxiously, Mister, didn't you say it was me? Didn't you promise me just now? Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked curiously, When did I promise you? I only said I'll consider it. Does that count as a promise? Mister, please consider it again. As long as Mister is willing to bring me to Obedient Island, I'll agree to anything. Yu Fengjiao was almost begging. It was difficult for an arrogant person to accept such an outcome, especially a woman who was more vain. Her words and actions would easily go to extremes. You'll really agree to anything? Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise. Yu Fengjiao's hope was reignited. She nodded repeatedly. All the demon ghosts below looked like they were watching a show. A satisfied smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He reached out his hand and gently caressed Yu Fengjiao's pretty face. The latter pretended to be shy. She wanted to refuse, but at the same time, she also wanted to welcome him. Under everyone's gaze, his hand slid down from her face to her fair neck. Then, it slid down again and gently pulled open her collar, which was already slightly open. Her two soft breasts were even more exposed. Yu Qianqiu asked with a smile, Yu Fengjiao, how dare you lie to me? You think you're a special treasure? You even dare to use it as a greeting gift? What right do you have to make me change my words? Are you tired of living? Yu Fengjiao, who had been acting as if she was ready to let him do whatever he wanted, suddenly felt something was wrong. His smiling words made her feel a little cold. She stammered, Mister, I misunderstood. Little demon. Shoo. Yu Qianqiu put up a finger in front of his mouth to shush her. His other hand caressed her neck. He smiled gently and said, Didn't you say that you'll agree to anything I ask of you? Then I'll let you die. His light laughter made all the demon ghosts below feel a chill down their spines. Fear instantly climbed onto Yu Fengjiao's face. That wandering hand grabbed her neck, but she didn't dare to resist. She begged, "Little demon won't dare, mister, please spare." Her red lips didn't finish her words, but she spat out a mouthful of cyan flame. Her entire body fiercely swelled up, then instantly shrank down. A cyan flame cut through her deformed body and spread out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, that beautiful woman turned into ashes. Along with the fluctuation of the flame, there was nothing left. Chapter 319. After burning Yu Fengjiao to death, the green flame spread and attached itself to Yu Qianqiu's body, wrapping him up completely. Yu Qianqiu stood in the middle of the breathtaking green flame, looking extremely creepy. He still had a smile on his face as he casually glanced at the audience. All the ghosts were shocked. They didn't expect Yu Fengjiao, the Demon King, to be killed just like that. She had been so flirtatious just a moment ago, but she had turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. They didn't understand what the green flame was. It was obviously not warm at all, but it was so domineering. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu was smiling calmly in it. This scene was unforgettable. This person was capricious and killed people with a smile. Compared to Bai Chongqun, he was even more difficult to please. All the ghosts came to a conclusion in their hearts. When they looked at Yu Qianqiu again, they all kept quiet out of fear. However, they couldn't help but feel sad for the death of a rabbit. This was the effect Yu Qianqiu wanted. Killing Yu Fengjiao was to establish his authority in front of the Demon Kings and the Ghost King. He wanted to tell everyone that he wasn't someone to be trifled with. Otherwise, if everyone learned from Yu Fengjiao, it would be a mess. And he, who was very likely to be the next torture commissioner, would have no authority to speak of. How could he deter the vast demon ghost region? He had to maintain the deterrence of the torture commissioner in the demon ghost region. The swollen and burning demonic green flame was put back into his body. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "Don't panic, everyone. I'm not someone who kills innocent people. Yu Fengjiao had evil intentions and deceived me first, so I killed her. When I return, I will report to my master and appoint another demon king." In fact, he also knew that if he really fought with Yu Fengjiao, he wouldn't be able to do much with his cultivation. At the very least, he wouldn't be able to kill her so easily. How could a demon king at the end of the tribulation passing stage be so easy to deal with? The key was that Yu Fengjiao didn't dare to resist Bai Chongqun's despotic power. She also didn't know that he had such a domineering green flame that could instantly destroy her demon body that she had cultivated for 1,000 years. If she knew that she would die, she might have dared to fight to the death. "Sir is wise," the demonic ghosts all bowed in unison. Now that things had come to this, no one would cause trouble for the dead Yu Fengjiao. At the same time, he gained a new understanding of Yu Qianqiu. At least in the past, Healy would not have dared to ask Bai Chongqun to appoint another demon king. Healy also did not have the ability to easily kill a demon king at the end of the tribulation stage. Originally, I wanted everyone to recommend a person to follow me to Obedient Island, but none of you made a decision. Thus, I can only make the decision on your behalf. A harmless smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face again. He looked around the stage and said, "Moon Yangzi is diligent in her work. I am very relieved. I am sure she will not delay my Shifu's important matter. Does anyone have any different opinions? If you do, why don't you tell me? I'll definitely consider it carefully." Yu Fengjiao, who had any objections, was killed by you. How dare we still have any objections? Isn't the lesson from the past enough? These were the thoughts in everyone's hearts, so they naturally didn't dare to say it out loud. Instead, they put on a look of sincere admiration and bowed in unison. "Mr. is wise, we have no objections." "That's good." Yu Qianqiu laughed and turned to Moon Yangzi. "Moon Yangzi, hand over the affairs of the stronghold as soon as possible. The Demon King's Shifu will naturally have a new appointment. From now on, Obedient Island will be your home." "Thank you, Mr. Moon Yangzi is very grateful." Under the envious gazes of the crowd, Moon Yangzi, who was pleasantly surprised, knelt down and bowed. Yu Qianqiu nodded and calmly accepted her bow, and then he turned around and said in a clear voice, I can be considered to have met all of you today. However, it is inconvenient for me to stay here for a long time, so please disperse and return to your respective territories. We'll naturally have the chance to meet again in the future. What he meant was for everyone to disperse, but most of them didn't even say a word to him. They were a little unwilling, but they didn't dare to object, so they bowed again and said, Take care, mister. We will take our leave now. A group of demons and ghosts walked out of the stronghold one after another. Yuji took a deep look at the stage, and didn't say what she wanted to say in the end. She sighed inwardly. When Yu Qianqiu first came to the demon ghost region, his life and death were all in her hands. But now, he was below one and above tens of thousands of people. He held the power of life and death in the demon ghost region. So what if he was the overlord of a territory, the demon king and the ghost king? Yu Fengjia was also a character in the demon ghost region. He could kill her if he wanted to. Now, who dared to disrespect him? She only hoped that he would remember the oath he made in the past. Outside the stronghold, streams of light of various colors flew across the sky. Yuji walked a little lonely at the back, which was particularly conspicuous. Yu Qianqiu's eyes fell on her leisurely walking figure. He paused for a moment, and a smile appeared on his face. He shouted, Sister-in-law Yuji, please wait. Yuji's body trembled, and she slowly turned around. Yu Qianqiu walked over with a smile, cupped his fists and said, I'll see you off, sister-in-law. I don't dare to trouble you to see me off. Yuji bowed and said, Sister-in-law, you're too polite. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and said, Please. Yuji couldn't refuse again. She nodded with a wry smile and followed him. When the two of them came out of the stronghold, the other demon kings and the ghost king had all left. Yuji bowed and said, Mister, please wait. Yuji bids farewell. Yu Qianqiu looked at the charming beauty in front of him, and couldn't help but think of the first time he saw her. In the camp of Meng Yan's army, she was sitting on a high platform with a pipa in her arms, showing off her elegance. What a scene it was. Now she had to yield to him. As the past flashed in his mind, he said with a smile, Sister-in-law, do you still remember the past? I, Yu Qianqiu, have never forgotten what I promised you. Yuji's body trembled, and her eyes immediately lit up. Surprise gradually appeared on her face. She bit her lips and nodded, saying, Thank you for your concern, mister. Sister-in-law, don't be surprised. Wait patiently. When I'm almost done with the things I have on hand, I will personally go to the Evil Wind Valley to visit you. It won't be too late to talk then. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. You will go to the Evil Wind Valley? That couldn't be any better. Yuji's face immediately returned to her usual charming smile. She bowed and said, Yuji will be waiting for Mister's arrival at any time. She only thought that Yu Qianqiu was concerned about her matters, and was extremely happy. But she didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had always been thinking about the 9 Netherworlds cave in the Evil Wind Valley. Sister-in-law, take care. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and said with a smile. Yuji suddenly became energetic. She smiled and nodded. Just when she was about to leave, she suddenly raised her hand and patted her forehead, saying, I almost forgot to tell Mr. something. A few days ago, a person trespassed into my territory and was caught. After interrogation, I found out that this person came from Fuxian Island, and his name was Yen Tuo. He said that he was looking for his son, Yen Shu. Originally, he wanted to execute him, but who knew that he mentioned Mister's name, saying that Mister told him that his son was in the Evil Wind Valley. Yuji saw that he mentioned Mister's name, and she thought that there must be a reason, so she temporarily detained him. I wonder if Mister knows this person? Yen Tuo? Of course he knew him. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and his expression became a little strange. After he killed his son, Yen Shu, he was pestered by him for questioning. In order to escape, he casually told a lie, saying that Yen Shu didn't die and was imprisoned in the Evil Wind Valley of the Demon Ghost Domain as a slave. Unexpectedly, after so many years, this old man was eager to save his son, and actually dared to trespass into the Demon Ghost Domain alone. He really wasn't afraid of death. I know this person, he is an old friend. Thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but laugh. He said with a deep meaning, "Sister-in-law, help me look after this person. Just don't kill him. When I have time, I will visit him. Just don't kill him." With Yu Ji's brain, she naturally understood that there was something between these two people. She smiled sweetly and said, "Yu Ji understands. Mister, please don't see me out. Yu Ji will take her leave. I won't be sending you off." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists. He watched as Yu Ji turned her waist, flung her long sleeves, and turned into a gray shadow as she flew away. After Yu Ji left, Lady Mu came to welcome him with a storage pouch and a jade archive. She smiled and said, "Mister, the storage pouch contains the gifts for the meeting between the King of Yao and the Ghost King. The jade archive contains the corresponding list." After Yu Qianqiu took it, he casually threw it into the storage pouch and asked, "How's your matter going? Can you come with me now?" Hearing this, Lady Mu frowned slightly. She said hesitantly, "To be honest, mister, I've already taken care of it. However, there is one thing that I need mister to decide on. My main body is in the fort. If I leave for too long, it will be troublesome. I need to return every once in a while. I'm afraid that would upset the torturer. Is it possible to transplant my main body to Obedient Island as well? Since it's possible to transplant it, just bring it to Obedient Island. I'll make the decision on this matter. I'll report this to Master when I get back. I believe Master won't say anything." Just like that, Yu Qianqiu decided on the matter. Since Bai Changchun had given him the authority, he wouldn't stand on ceremony. He didn't want Bai Changchun to say that Healy was treating him like an outsider. "Thank you, mister." Lady Mu returned to the fort in a flash. She was probably going to transplant her main body. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.